Chapter 2310. Who is it? Shin Qianshan roared and immediately stood up. He took a step above the entrance, and his rolling divine power turned into angry waves that surged towards the sword light. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shaking rumble, the divine power crazily disintegrated and dissipated. Legendary divine artifact! Shen Qianshan's pupils shrank, and the aura emitted by this sword light, in his mind, the shadow of a battle sword involuntarily appeared. Azure Phoenix sword. Could it be him? Shin Qianshan muttered, and a strong cold light suddenly appeared in his eyes. He shouted, "You dare to cause trouble in Heavenly Cloud Mountain. No matter who you are, you will die." He waved his hand and a broadsword appeared. It was as wide as an adult's palm, and its entire body was black. The blade was suffused with a cold light. Demon slaughtering blade, awaken! Following Shin Qianshan's low shout, the blade suddenly bloomed with a black divine light. A world-destroying sharpness came out with earth-shattering force. Immediately after, he slashed out, and a blade light shattered the sky and collided with the sword light. The two immediately collapsed in the void, giving birth to a terrifying wave of air. Boom! In an instant, the mountains here collapsed and the earth sank. A huge barrier suddenly appeared behind Shin Qianshan. The barrier enveloped the entire Heavenly Cloud Mountain, and its light was dazzling. It still covered half the sky. This was the barrier that protected Heavenly Cloud Mountain. Under the impact of a powerful fluctuation, it automatically appeared and protected Heavenly Cloud Mountain. What's going on? The sound of the battle also alarmed everyone in Heavenly Cloud Mountain. Regardless of whether it was the disciples or the higher-ups, they all rushed out of their caves and looked in the direction of the entrance in surprise. Just as the sword light dissipated, in the sky above the mountains outside the plains, a young man wearing a fiery red robe and long fiery red hair walked over step by step. It really is him. Shin Qianshan muttered. That's right. The young man in the fiery robe was Hui. But at this time, he had not taken the heavenly dust divine pill. His cultivation was still at half-step indestructible. We meet again, we are really fated. Hui held the Azure Phoenix sword and stopped in the void opposite Shin Qianshan. Shin Qianshan rolled his eyes and said, "What are you doing here?" "You can transmit your voice." Hui asked. "Yes. That woman has been with the sect master of the treasure school for the past few days." "There's no need to be afraid." Shin Qianshan transmitted his voice. Hui nodded and asked via voice transmission, "Where's your peak master?" Shin Qianshan was stunned. He frowned and said, "You came for the peak master?" "It wasn't me. It was Qin Feiyang. He said that before we leave, we must get rid of the murderous intent hidden in your peak master's body." Hui helplessly said, "That's a good thing." Shin Qianshan was delighted. He thought to himself, "How should I cooperate with you?" "Simple. It's fine as long as you fall." Hui transmitted his voice. "It can't be that simple. Even if I fall and let you enter Heaven Cloud Mountain, the Vice Peak Master will revive the heaven-punishing sword and stop you." Shin Qianshan said, "I'm fine. Just tell me, where is your Peak Master now?" Hui thought, "You don't have to look for the Peak Master. It's because the murderous intent is not inside the Peak Leader's body." Shin Qianshan thought to himself. Hui was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Then where is it?" "The Peak Master never cares about anything. It's meaningless to hide it in his body. So when we returned from the Tianluo Sea, the murderous intent was hidden in the Vice Peak Master. As for the Vice Peak Master, he's probably rushing here now, so you don't have to enter Heaven Cloud Mountain. Just stay here and wait." Shin Qianshan said. "I see." Hui suddenly understood and laughed secretly. "Then let's spar." "Sure. I want to see your true strength. However, let's not fight here. so as not to hurt the innocent. Shan Qianshan's eyes flashed. He held the demon-slaughtering saber and rushed into the sky. Hua Yi chuckled and chased after him with the azure phoenix sword. Above the ninth heaven, there was a vast and boundless galaxy. In this galaxy, even a half-step Undying Realm expert could fight without any worries. I've fought with you twice, but I've never seen you use a divine art. Today, let me see it. Shan Qianshan chuckled. That depends on whether you have the ability or not. Hua Yi said. The two of them stood in the Milky Way, separated by space. The demon-slaughtering saber and azure phoenix, sword in their hands, were rapidly recovering. Clang! Suddenly, the two stepped forward at the same time and attacked each other. Clang! Immediately, this galaxy was drowned by the saber light and sword shadow. The terrifying sharpness swept in all directions. The strength of the two was almost equal. Wounds appeared on their bodies one after another, and blood flowed in the galaxy. Although it was a spar, the two did not show mercy. However, Hua Yi had never activated his divine art. Since Hua Yi did not activate it, Shan Qianshan naturally did not either. This was a collision between cultivation and divine artifact. About 10 breaths passed. Boom! Another 2 terrifying auras rushed into the sky. It's the Vice Peak Master and Ancestral Dragon's murderous intent, Shan Qianshan said in a deep voice. Then I'll have to trouble you. A cold light flashed in Hua Yi's eyes, and a sword entered Shan Qianshan's lower abdomen. Fresh blood immediately spurted out. Then, Hua Yi slapped Shan Qianshan's chest again. Puff! Shan Qianshan immediately flew out, his face pale. Old Shin, almost at the same time. Accompanied by a cry of surprise, a woman in colorful clothes rushed into the galaxy and hugged Shan Qianshan from behind. It was the Deputy Peak Master of Heavenly Cloud Mountain. Murderous intent also transformed into a human form and stood beside the woman in colorful clothes. Damn! Why is there still murderous intent? Hua Yi looked at Ancestral Gragon's murderous intent and pretended to be surprised. Humph! Murderous intent sneered. The woman in colorful clothes asked with concern, Old Shen, are you all right? I'm fine, but you have to be careful. This person's strength cannot be underestimated, Shan Qianshan warned. The woman in colorful clothes nodded and put down Shan Qianshan. She looked up at Hua Yi. Her gaze was extremely cold. First it was Su Mo and his sister, and now it's old Shin. Do you think my Heavenly Cloud Mountain is easy to bully? Her voice fell. Rays of sword light emerged. With a loud clang, the heaven-punishing divine sword appeared. The terrifying divine might was like a torrent of beasts rolling out. The Milky Way began to tremble. Damn, you're starting to use a heaven-defying divine artifact. Hua Yi's expression changed. Without hesitation, he took out a pill from his arms and threw it into his mouth. It was the Heavenly Dust divine pill. Boom! At that moment, his aura soared. In the blink of an eye, his cultivation rose to the initial Undying Realm. This, the woman in colorful clothes, looked at Hua Yi in surprise. Ancestral Gragon's murderous intent also had a look of disbelief. The change in this person's cultivation was actually because of the pill. What kind of pill was this? It actually had such a terrifying ability. Good chance. Hua Yi secretly sneered and launched a teleportation. His cultivation rose to the initial Undying Realm, and his speed naturally soared by a lot. Without waiting for the woman in colorful clothes to come back to her senses, he fell behind murderous intent and sneered. First get rid of you, then deal with Heavenly Cloud Mountain. And murderous intent suddenly quivered and hurriedly shouted at the woman in colorful clothes, Quick! The woman in colorful clothes came back to her senses, grabbed the heaven-punishing divine sword, and turned to slash at Hua Yi. But Hui was one step faster. Divine power surged, crushing ancestral Gragon's murderous intent. Then, with a flash, he retreated. Today, I won't let you escape again. The woman in colorful clothes chased after him, her eyes flashing with a shocking light. But at this moment, Shen Qianshan suddenly stood in front of Hui. The woman in colorful clothes hurriedly braked and said in surprise, "Old Shinu." Shen Qianshan smiled and said, "Actually, this old man deliberately got injured." Hui looked at Shen Qianshan and said, "Are you going to tell her?" Shen Qianshan said, "Murderous intent has been completely eliminated. It's time to tell her." "All right." Hui nodded. It was good to tell this woman, lest she chased after them every day with a heaven-defying artifact. The woman in colorful clothes frowned and said, "Old Shin, what are you talking about?" Shen Qianshan looked at the woman in colorful clothes and said with a smile, "Actually, this old man has been secretly helping Qin Feiyang and Hui." Helping them? The woman in colorful clothes was stunned. Shen Qianshan continued, "Not only this old man, but also the Chou Tianwei and the Treasure Pavilion Master, including the Nine Heavens Palace and the Treasure Pavilion of the Northern Region, are also helping him. Why are you doing this? Do you know that by doing this, you are going against the dragons?" Shen Qianshan's words shocked the woman in colorful clothes. "Of course we know, but we want to take a gamble," Shen Qianshan said. "A gamble?" The woman in colorful clothes murmured and fell silent. Shen Qianshan asked, "You should know what this old man is betting on, right?" "I know." The woman in colorful clothes nodded and said, "But have you ever thought about what will happen to us if we fail?" Shen Qianshan said, "If you haven't tried, how do you know that we will definitely fail?" The woman in colorful clothes hesitated. "This old man is telling you now because I want you to make a decision. Of course, this old man will not force you. If you are unwilling, this old man will choose to leave Heavencloud Mountain. At that time, if we fail, Heavencloud Mountain will not be implicated because of this old man." Shen Qianshan said, "Leave Heavencloud Mountain." The woman in colorful clothes' gaze trembled as she looked at Shen Qianshan and said, "You have already made up your mind." "Someone must stand up and take this step. This old man also does not know what will happen in the future. But even if I die in battle, this old man will not regret today's decision." Shen Qianshan said. The woman in colorful clothes looked at Shen Qianshan and then at Hui and said, "This is the purpose of your Eastern Tomb? Persuade us to join your side?" No. Don't misunderstand. Qin Feiyang and I came to Eastern Tomb purely to find someone. As for Shen Qianshan and the others, this is completely their own decision. However, I also support them. After all, a person's life is neither long nor short. They have to do something meaningful. And once this matter is completed, we will benefit the future generations. Taking a step back, even if we fail, our names will go down in history and become the role model of the future generations. Hui smiled. Chapter 23:11. Benefits. Goals? There was a hint of mockery in the eyes of the multicolor-clothed woman as she said, "If we fail, we will be sinners of the 4 major regions. Can you think about this calmly? How can I not understand this logic? But even if we don't resist, what can we gain? Let me tell you, there will only be endless bullying. Do you think this way we won't be sinners? Actually, it's the same, and the future generations will only call us weak and incompetent trash. Do you understand?" Shen Qianshan sighed. The multicolor-clothed woman was silent. "Let me put it this way. Qin Beishan's current strength has already reached the level of the ancestral dragon. Moreover, he has comprehended a kind of space-time law power." Hui looked at the multicolor-clothed woman and said, "What?" The multicolor-clothed woman's eyes trembled, filled with disbelief. "Some time ago, I went to the divine land with Qin Feiyang and saw him with my own eyes, so I know his current strength. What Yi said. The multicolor-clothed woman said, So he is your hope? Yes, but in my opinion, the most promising one is still Qin Feiyang. What Yi said with a smile. Qin Feiyang? The multicolor-clothed woman frowned. His talent, his ability, and his mind are all incomparable to ordinary people. I even have a feeling that his future achievements will only be higher than Qin Beishan's. What Yi said. Is this why you followed him? The multicolor-clothed woman asked. That's only secondary. I followed him for another reason, but I won't reveal it for the time being. What Yi said. The multicolor-clothed woman frowned and said, Who exactly are you? That's not important. What Yi shook his head. The multicolor-clothed woman asked again, Does Qin Feiyang know about this? Not for the time being, but his ultimate goal is the same as ours, to enter the divine land. What Yi said. The multicolor-clothed woman fell silent again. In the end, do you want to continue living lowly or stand up bravely? Think about it carefully. After Hua Yi finished speaking, he put away the azure phoenix sword and turned into a beam of light. Without looking back, he left the galaxy and disappeared. The multicolor-clothed woman lowered her head and remained silent for a long time. Shen Qianshan did not say anything. Boom! Suddenly, 2 more powerful auras appeared. It's the pavilion master of the treasure pavilion and Chou Tianwei. That woman should be with them as well. Old Shin's expression immediately changed as he spoke. The multicolor-robed woman looked beyond the galaxy and said, This matter is too important. Later, I'll have to trouble you to accompany me to find the peak master and discuss this with him. All right. Shen Qianshan nodded. He grabbed the heaven-punishing divine sword and stabbed it into the woman's lower abdomen. The woman did not say anything and put away the heaven-punishing divine sword. She knew that Shen Qianshan was putting on an act. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, the pavilion master of the treasure pavilion and the Chou Tianwei flew into the Milky Way. As expected, the woman was with them. The treasure pavilion's pavilion master and Chou Tianwei's expressions changed when they saw the sword wounds on Shen Qianshan and Chou Tianwei's abdomen. They hastily asked, What happened? It's Hui. Not only did he injure us, but he also destroyed Lord Ancestral Dragon's killing intent. Shen Qianshan said in a low voice, Hui, how did he do it? The woman frowned. Not long ago, he suddenly took an elixir and his cultivation directly increased to the initial imperishable realm. We were a little careless. Otherwise, we would not have been seriously injured by him. Shen Qianshan sighed. So the change in his cultivation is related to the elixir. The Chou Tianwei suddenly understood. The treasure pavilion master asked curiously, What kind of elixir is it? I've never seen it before. Shen Qianshan shook his head. I've been in charge of the Eastern Tomb Treasure Pavilion for so many years, but this is the first time I've heard of an elixir that can increase the cultivation of an imperishable realm expert. The Treasure Pavilion master exclaimed. The woman frowned and asked, Where are they now? I don't know. When he saw that we were about to use the divine artifact, he fled. I believe you also know the difference between a half-step imperishable realm expert and an initial imperishable realm expert. With our speed, we can't catch up to him. Shen Qianshan said. The woman nodded. She looked up at the Star River, and a milky white light appeared in her eyes. Shen Qianshan and the other 3 looked at each other in silence. Boom! At this moment, a deafening sound suddenly rang out. The 5 of them were shocked. They hurriedly turned and flew out of the Star River. When they flew out of the Star River, the color of the woman in colorful clothes and Shen Qianshan suddenly changed. They saw that the barrier protecting Heavencloud Mountain was rapidly collapsing. What's going on? The treasure pavilion master and the Cho Tianwei were also very surprised. Look, the woman suddenly pointed at the canyon inside the entrance of Heavencloud Mountain. In the depths of the canyon, there was a huge altar. Next to the altar, two young men stood side by side. One of them was reviving the altar. Weren't they Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi? Hua Yi had left the Star River and met up with Qin Feiyang, but he did not leave. He had been lurking near the entrance. Behind them, when the Treasure Pavilion Master and the Cho Tianwei brought the woman into the Star River, they shattered the barrier and revived the altar. The barrier of Heavencloud Mountain was set up by the Peak Master. Although the Peak Master was also a half-step Undying Realm expert, Hu Yi's cultivation had reached the initial Undying Realm. Naturally, he could easily break the barrier. As for why they did this, of course, they did it on purpose for the woman to see. They wanted to let the woman know that they had left Dongling. This way, the woman would not continue to stay in Dongling. So their goal is the altar. Shan Qianshan saw this scene and was immediately furious. That can't be right. I heard from the ancestral Gragon that he has a divine artifact called the Space-Time Gate. Since he has a teleportation divine artifact, why would he go through so much trouble to come to Heavencloud Mountain? The woman raised her eyebrows. This kind of divine artifact basically has restrictions. I think the Space-Time Gate is the same. So generally speaking, no one will easily open it unless it's a critical moment. Shan Qianshan said in a deep voice. That makes sense. The woman nodded and shouted, What are you waiting for? Go stop them. Hearing this, the four of them immediately swooped down. At the same time, a terrifying aura erupted from the deepest part of Heavencloud Mountain. Qin Feiyang was shocked. He looked up at the deepest part and said, It can't be the Peak Master, right? These people are very fast, and this kind of altar needs time to revive. I'm afraid it's too late. Hua Yi frowned. Then open the space-time gate. Anyway, we just need to let her see us leave Dongling with her own eyes. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the space-time gate appeared. Divine power immediately gushed out. Hua Yi also immediately helped to revive the space-time gate. With Hua Yi's cultivation in front of him, it was naturally quite fast. In the blink of an eye, the space-time gate opened. The two looked at each other and immediately rushed into the space-time gate. Then they waved at the woman and smiled. Little beauty, if fate wills it, we'll meet again. Don't be arrogant. Sooner or later, you'll fall into my hands. The woman glared at the two angrily. Next time, it might not be us who'll fall into your hands. It might be you who'll fall into our hands. At that time, I'll definitely love you well. Hua Yi grinned. After he finished speaking, accompanied by a clang, the two disappeared. The space-time gate also disappeared. Damn it! The woman was so angry that she stomped her feet. In the southwest of the northern region, there was a mountain. The mountain was lush with vegetation and wild beasts. In a small valley, a small courtyard was located in the middle of the valley. The courtyard was very simple, like an ordinary house. There was a vegetable garden around it. The green wild vegetables exuded vitality. On the left side of the courtyard, there was a small pond. Inside, lotus leaves stood tall, and the lotus flowers were blooming. And beside the pond, a woman about 35 or 36 years old was cleaning the weeds on the shore. The woman was wearing a red dress. Her black hair was tied up high with an exquisite jade hairpin in her hair. She looked dignified and virtuous, although crow's feet could be faintly seen at the corner of her eyes, whether it was her figure or her skin. They were all like a young girl. She also looked very gentle and did not have a threatening aura at all. Clang! Suddenly, in the sky above the valley, there was a deafening sound. The woman raised her head and saw an ancient door rapidly materializing in the sky. Whoosh! Following closely, two figures rushed out of the door. Who else could it be but Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi? Qin Feiyang put away the space-time gate and looked down at the valley below. When he saw the woman, a smile appeared on his face. This woman was Shangguan Qiu's master, the chief pavilion master of the treasure pavilion of the northern region. Senior, I'm really sorry to disturb you again. Qin Feiyang flew down and smiled apologetically. The woman glanced at the two and said, Looking at you, you must have escaped from Dongling. How is that possible? Look at my current cultivation. Who in Dongling can be my opponent? Hua Yi said proudly. Cultivation? The woman was slightly stunned. She looked at Hua Yi for a while and said in surprise, Your cultivation? Hua Yi said, Yes, I have broken through to the initial imperishable realm. The woman took a deep breath and said, It seems that what Xin Qianshan said last time was true. What did Xin Qianshan say? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Last time, he came to inform us that the ancestral dragon left killing intent in Dongling. He also said that Hua Yi's cultivation has reached the initial imperishable realm. We didn't believe it. I didn't expect it to be true. The woman said in disbelief. Qin Feiyang nodded and glanced at the proud Hua Yi. He said, Senior, don't listen to him. His cultivation changed because he took a kind of pill. Pill? The woman was stunned. Hua Yi's expression also stiffened. He said angrily, Why do you like to undermine me so much? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and looked at the woman. He pleaded, Senior, we have to go to the next stop quickly. Please make it convenient. Because he didn't know the coordinates of the western desert and southern wasteland, he could only ask the woman for help. The great elder of Nine Heavens Palace definitely knew, but there were too many people in Nine Heavens Palace. Where to? The woman was suspicious. Western desert, southern wasteland. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, looked at Hua Yi and said, Where are we going first? Why are you asking me? You decide. It's not like I'm going to find someone, Hua Yi said impatiently. Qin Feiyang was speechless. He thought for a moment, looked at the woman, and said, Then let's go to the western desert first. The woman didn't refuse, nor did she ask for the reason. She said, Then I'll send you there personally. That's not good. Because I'm worried that the dragons people might come looking for you later. Qin Feiyang said. The woman smiled. It seems that you really escaped back. You can say that. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Okay, wait a moment. The woman nodded. After she finished speaking, she stepped into the courtyard and entered the room. In less than 10 breaths, she came out again, and there was something in her hand. It was a letter. The woman landed in front of the two and handed the letter to Qin Feiyang. She said, When you reach the western desert, give this letter to the treasure pavilion master of the western desert, but you're not allowed to peek. Thank you. Qin Feiyang said gratefully and put it in his arms. The woman waved her hand, and the pond split open again, revealing the secret room below. She smiled and said, Be careful, Go. The two nodded and jumped down. Hua Yi then revived the altar and quickly left. Chapter 23:12. Swoosh! Not long after Qin Feiyang and Shangguan Qiu left, a white figure appeared in the sky above the valley. The woman looked up, and a smile appeared on her face. Master. The woman in white landed in front of the woman and bowed. That's right. This woman was Shangguan Qiu. Why are you here? The woman raised her hand and tidied Shangguan Qiu's messy hair, her eyes full of love. Shangguan Qiu sighed. I'm afraid you won't be able to escape this time. The woman was stunned. There's a woman who claims to be one of the dragons. She wants you to meet her. The owner of the East Hill Treasure Pavilion and the deputy peak master of Tianyan Mountain are with her. Shangguan Qiu said. The woman of the dragons. The woman's eyes flashed, and she sighed. She's here. Master, you knew she would come? Shangguan Qiu was surprised. I knew the dragons would come. but I didn't know it would be a woman. The woman said, "How did you know? Could it be that someone tipped him off?" Shang Guanqiu was suspicious. The woman was silent for a while. Then she looked at Shang Guanqiu and said, "It's Qin Feiyang." Qin Feiyang. Shang Guanqiu trembled. "Do you still hate him?" the woman asked. "Hate," Shang Guanqiu murmured and shook her head. "It's all in the past. Why should I hate him?" "I'm glad you think so." The woman smiled. Shang Guanqiu forced a smile, took out a note, and handed it to the woman. "What's this?" The woman looked at her, puzzled. Shang Guanqiu said, "The owner of the East Hill Treasure Pavilion secretly gave this to us." The woman quickly took the note, opened it, and was shocked. There was a line of small words written on the slip of paper. This woman could hear sound transmissions and peek into spatial divine objects. In front of her, one must not secretly communicate or secretly monitor her. How could she have such an ability? The woman murmured, her face full of disbelief. "What's wrong?" Shang Guanqiu was surprised. "Nothing. Let's go." The woman shook her head and shredded the slip of paper before activating the teleportation altar. Shang Guanqiu looked at the woman suspiciously and asked casually, "Where is Qin Feiyang now?" The woman was slightly taken aback. She smiled and said, "You still care about him." Shang Guanqiu blushed. "Silly girl." The woman shook her head and said, "Love depends on fate. It can't be forced." "I know." Shang Guanqiu nodded. The woman said, "He went to the Western Desert. I think he went to look for someone. Let's go quickly. Don't let that major character wait for too long." After saying that, he jumped onto the altar. "Western Desert," Shang Guanqiu murmured and leaped onto the altar. "Let's talk about Qin Feiyang and Qin Haodong." At this moment, the two of them were standing in the air above a piece of dry land. Their faces were filled with shock. On the ground below, other than a small oasis directly below them, as far as the eye could see, there was not a single blade of grass growing on the ground, and it was deathly still. Cracks also appeared on the ground like a spider web. It looked like a land of death. There was no sign of life at all. This is the Western Desert. The two of them looked at each other in disbelief. This environment was too harsh. The scorching sun hanging in the sky emitted a sinister light. Standing in the void was like standing in a furnace, sweating all over. "What?" he said. "How can we survive in such an environment?" "This is actually nothing." Qin Feiyang shook his head. What? He was taken aback. He asked suspiciously, "You mean you've seen a place worse than this?" "Yes. There are 10 suns on the first level of the divine site. Do you think the environment is worse than this?" Qin Feiyang said. 10 suns? He was shocked. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing. "Wait." Qin Feiyang's face suddenly changed. "What's wrong?" He quickly looked at him in surprise. Qin Feiyang said, "We left in a hurry just now and forgot to tell the pavilion master about that woman's ability." He thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, we didn't tell her. That's not good." What if that woman goes to the northern region? What if the pavilion master, great elder, and the others send a voice transmission in front of her? Qin Feiyang was worried. "No, we have to go back immediately. Look at how worried you are." If you can think of it, Shan Qianshan and the others can think of it too. And Shan Qianshan and the others don't know that we've returned to the northern region. So just in case, they will definitely think of a way to inform the great elder and the others. He was not worried at all. Qin Feiyang frowned. "But what if something unexpected happens? Can't you have some confidence in them? No matter what, they are the highest authorities in Dongling and the northern region. Don't they have the ability to do that? Don't think that you're the only smart person in the world." He rolled his eyes. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, "Did I say that I'm smart? I'm worried about them." He said disdainfully, "I think you're just showing off your cleverness." Fine, fine, fine. I am. I can't be bothered to talk to you. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly appeared and rushed toward the two of them. The two of them were shocked and hurriedly looked down. The aura came from the only oasis directly below. This is the aura of a half-step Eternal Realm expert. I think the owner of this aura should be the pavilion master of the Western Desert Treasure Pavilion. What he said. Senior, don't misunderstand. We didn't break into the Western Desert without permission. We have the permission of the pavilion master of the Northern Region Treasure Pavilion. Qin Feiyang hurriedly exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, the terrifying aura suddenly stopped and then retreated back into the oasis like a tide. Then, a figure rushed out of the oasis like lightning and appeared in front of Qin Feiyang and Hui. It was an old man. His skin was dark and he was short, only about 6 meters tall, but he was extremely strong. His upper body was bare, revealing his well-developed muscles. His long hair was also black. He looked even stronger than the young man. Qin Feiyang looked at the old man, and a trace of surprise gradually appeared in his eyes. He said to himself, Hey, don't you feel that this old man is a bit familiar? He is a bit familiar. Hui nodded. Suddenly, the two of them looked at each other, and a figure appeared in their minds at the same time. The Cho Tianwei. That's right. The old man in front of them was extremely similar to the Cho Tianwei. Not only did they look similar, but even their height and figure were exactly the same. At the same time, the old man was also looking at Qin Feiyang and Hui. He didn't pay much attention to Qin Feiyang, who was just a low-level divine lord. However, Hui caused his pupils to fiercely shrink. This aura was even stronger than his. Could it be that he was a low-level Eternal Realm expert? Qin Feiyang asked, Senior, are you the pavilion master of the Western Desert Treasure Pavilion? Yes. The old man nodded. Qin Feiyang took out a letter from his bosom and handed it to the old man. He said, The pavilion master of the Northern Region Treasure Pavilion asked me to pass this to you. The old man looked at the letter suspiciously, then took it in his hand, opened the envelope, took out the letter inside, and opened it to read carefully. Qin Feiyang and Hui stood on their tiptoes and looked at the letter. They were very curious about what was written on it, but the old man seemed to be deliberately guarding against them, not giving them a chance to peek. A moment later, the old man clenched his hand, and the letter immediately shattered. Then he looked up at the two of them and said, I'll give you the coordinates of Sky Chi City. When you're done, quickly leave the Western Desert. With that, the old man gave them more than a dozen coordinates. Sky Chi City? Qin Feiyang and Hui were suspicious. The old man said, Sky Chi City is the largest city in the Western Desert. It's convenient for you to ask for information. Thank you, Senior. Qin Feiyang bowed. The old man waved his hand, indicating that the two of them could leave. Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment and looked at the old man. May I ask, Senior, what is your relationship with Senior Cho Tianwei? The old man was slightly stunned and said in surprise, You know Cho Tianwei? Qin Feiyang said, To tell you the truth, we just came out of Dongling. The old man said, Cho Tianwei is my younger brother. Qin Feiyang and Hui nodded in realization. No wonder they were so similar. They were brothers. If there's a chance, I'll have to trouble Senior to pass on a message to Senior Cho. Thank you for taking care of the two of us in Dongling. Please be careful, Senior. If nothing unexpected happens, there will definitely be a woman coming to the Western Desert today. She's a member of the Dragons. She can hear other people's voice transmissions and has the ability to see spatial divine objects. Qin Feiyang said. The old man was shocked. Could it be Long Zun? Long Zun. Qin Feiyang and Hui looked at each other. Long Zun also had the ability to see spatial divine objects? It seemed that the old man in front of them also knew about the dragons. Senior, we also suspected it was Long Zun, but all the signs showed that she shouldn't be Long Zun. According to our guess, she should be someone very close to Long Zun. Qin Feiyong said. Someone close to Long Zun, the old man murmured. Suddenly his body trembled and said, Then it can only be her. Who? Qin Feiyong and Hua Yi asked in unison. The old man looked at the two and waved his hand. You two go quickly. Qin Feiyong said, Senior, is there something you can't say? Before you're sure, you can't say anything. The old man shook his head. Qin Feiyong and Hua Yi smiled helplessly and could only open the teleportation altar and leave. The other party clearly didn't want to say. It was useless to force it. Dragons, Long Zun, the old man muttered to himself. After a long time, he disappeared into the oasis below with a long sigh. Chapter 23:13. Qin Feiyong, why did you specifically state that the vengeful sky guards took care of us? On the way to Sky Chi City, Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Qin Feiyong said, This is to let that old man completely relax his vigilance against us. Hua Yi nodded and asked, Do you have any plans this time? What other plans can there be? Just like looking for the demon ancestor, let Dong Jinyang show himself. Qin Feiyong said. Hua Yi smiled and said, Then it seems that my cultivation can still come in handy. Qin Feiyong, let me go out for a while. The demon ancestor's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyong's mind. Qin Feiyong was taken aback and took out the demon ancestor. I think that even if Dong Jinyang is in the western desert, he might not show himself when he hears of your appearance. The demon ancestor looked at Qin Feiyong and said, Why? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Because he is also afraid that you will attack him. The demon ancestor shook his head and smiled. Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly. He was not a demon. Why was everyone afraid of him? The demon ancestor said, I have an idea. Say it. Qin Feiyong said, I will go with you. When he hears that I am with you, I think he will not have any worries. The demon ancestor said, Okay. Qin Feiyong nodded. As long as he could find Dong Jinyang, he would do anything. During the conversation, the three of them opened more than a dozen altars one after another and appeared in the sky above an oasis. This oasis was quite big. It covered an area of hundreds of thousands of miles. The mountains were undulating and the vegetation was lush. Traces of beasts and humans could be seen everywhere. And in the center of the oasis, there was a huge city that exuded an ancient aura. Sky Chi City. Above the city gate, there were 3 large words that looked like iron hooks and silver strokes, magnificent and imposing. Hua Yi asked, Should we kill our way in? Don't hurt the innocent, Qin Feiyong said. Hua Yi grinned. With a wave of his hand, he swept up Qin Feiyong and the demon ancestor and descended into the skies above the city. The city was crowded with people and bustling with noise and excitement. Robbery. Suddenly, an explosive shout exploded like a clap of thunder, resounding in the sky above the city. Everyone raised their heads and looked over. When they saw Qin Feiyong and the other 2, they were immediately stunned. Robbery? What an idiot. Don't you know where you are? No one cared. I'll go. You guys are too calm. This makes me lose face, you know. Hua Yi said angrily, and his expression was filled with displeasure. Idiot. Where did this lunatic come from? Get the hell out of here. Everyone rolled their eyes. Hua Yi's face twitched as he angrily shouted, Do you think this young master is joking with you? Boom. His voice fell. His newly formed immortal realm aura suddenly erupted. The entire city began to tremble. The buildings cracked and collapsed one after another. This pressure, this time. The people could no longer remain calm as their faces were filled with fear. Whoosh! Suddenly, A black figure flew out from a mansion in the center of the city and landed in front of Qin Feiyang and the other two. This was a middle-aged man wearing a black-fitting robe. The aura he exuded was extremely powerful, at least an immortal. But looking at Hui, his face was filled with fear as he bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord." "Who are you?" Hui raised his eyebrows. The burly man said, "I am the city lord of Sky Chilin City. May I know your names?" "This young master will never change his name or surname." "Hui, the two beside me are Qin Feiyang and Demon Ancestor. As for our purpose in coming to Sky Chilin City, it's very simple. We are here to rob Sky Chilin City. Immediately tell everyone to obediently put down their universe rings and universe bags. If anyone dares to play any tricks, this young master will slaughter the entire Sky Chilin City." Hui shouted. His voice was like a bell, spreading into the ears of everyone in the city. "Hui, Qin Feiyang, Demon Ancestor, who are they? Why haven't I heard of them before?" Everyone was discussing. The city lord of Sky Chilin City was also bewildered. But more than that, he was shocked. When others robbed, they were looking for a single target. But these three people in front of him actually wanted to rob an entire city? This was too crazy. "Didn't you hear?" Hui shouted angrily. A wisp of pressure blasted towards the city lord. The city lord was sent flying on the spot. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face instantly turned pale. "What? The city lord is actually so weak." Everyone's eyes widened in anger. Impudent! At this moment, accompanied by an angry shout, another old man rushed into the sky. His aura was extremely powerful. It was a peak ninth heaven realm expert. "Hui," he said, "report your name." The old man said coldly, "I am the Vice Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion." Vice Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion? Hui was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. No wonder your cultivation is so strong. However, in front of this young master, you still have to lie down. The pressure surged out. The old man was immediately sent flying, blood gushing out of his mouth. This, even the Vice Pavilion Master, is not his match? Everyone looked at this scene in shock. What was this person's cultivation? The old man was also extremely shocked. A mere peak ninth heaven palace dares to be arrogant in front of this young master? Do you know this young master's cultivation? Initial immortal realm. Hui said proudly. What? Initial immortal realm? The old man's body and mind trembled. The city lord could not help but tremble. This was fear. The old man came back to his senses and hurriedly said, "Sir, let's talk nicely. Don't hurt everyone." If this young master wanted to hurt them, do you think they would still have the chance to stand below and watch the show? This young master said that he was here to rob Sky Chilin City. As long as you obediently put down your universe rings and universe bags, this young master will not hurt a single person. What he said, the old man immediately shouted, "Quick, take out your universe bags and universe rings and place them on the ground." No one dared to hesitate, although they were reluctant. Their lives were more important. What? There are actually people who want to rob Sky Chilin City? What did you say their names were? Hui, Qin Feiyang, Demon Ancestor. So unfamiliar. Who are these people? They actually have such guts. Such a big matter naturally spread out very quickly. Near Sky Chilin City, there was a towering mountain. The vegetation here was especially lush. The giant peaks were like battle swords that towered into the sky. Each of the giant peaks had countless cave abodes. At the peak of the mountain, there were also ancient halls. A young man in his 20s hurriedly ran to a cave and knocked on the door. He shouted, "Senior Brother Dong, open the door!" Soon, the cave's stone door opened. A young man in black stood at the door and looked at the young man suspiciously. "What's wrong? Why are you in such a hurry? Senior Brother Dong, just now a huge matter happened in Sky Chilin City. The young man gasped for breath. What happened? The man in black asked. 3 people popped out of nowhere and are robbing Sky Chilin City. The young man said. Robbing Sky Chilin City? The man in black was stunned and rolled his eyes at the young man. Don't joke around. I'm not joking with you. And it's said that one of them is extremely terrifying. Even the Sky Chilin City Lord and the Treasure Pavilion's Deputy Pavilion Master are not his match. The young man said. The man in black saw that the young man was serious and said, Really? Why would I lie to you? Right now, the entire Stellar Hall is discussing this matter. Only a cultivation maniac like you doesn't know. The young man said helplessly. It's really unbelievable. The man in black muttered and asked, Who are they to be so bold? I'm not sure, but I heard that they are called Hua-Yi, Qin Feiyang Demon Ancestor. The young man said, What? The man in black was stunned and hurriedly said, Say it again. What are their names? Hua-Yi, Qin Feiyang Demon Ancestor. The young man said, Qin Feiyang Demon Ancestor. The man in black was stunned. Was this a coincidence? But how could there be such a coincidence in this world? Whoosh! Suddenly, the man in black turned into a stream of light and tore through the sky like lightning. Back to Qin Feiyang and the other 2. Hua-Yi stood in the sky with an overbearing aura like a king. A terrifying aura enveloped the entire city. Whether it was the Treasure Pavilion's Deputy Pavilion Master, the City Lord, or the others, they felt as if they had fallen into hell. The streets and alleys of the city were filled with interspatial rings and interspatial bags. The demon ancestor looked at Hua-Yi and asked, Are you really going to rob these interspatial rings and interspatial bags? You think I'm joking? Hua-Yi turned to look at him and said in shock. The demon ancestor was stunned. He originally thought that Hua-Yi was just putting on an act, but he did not expect him to really have such thoughts. How much wealth was there in the entire city when all the interspatial rings and interspatial bags were added together? Even a divine treasure could not compare to it. The demon ancestor swallowed his saliva and said, Isn't this a little too much? Too much? Hua-Yi was stunned. He looked at the demon ancestor strangely and said, I've heard Qin Feiyang talk about your past deeds. You're such a ruthless person, but you actually have compassion? The demon ancestor smiled bitterly and said, Isn't that all in the past? It seems that you've really changed. Hua-Yi said, I think it's pretty good now. At least my conscience won't be condemned. The demon ancestor shook his head and smiled. Qin Feiyang looked at him deeply. Even if the demon ancestor really turned over a new leaf, it would be difficult for him to get over the hurdle in his heart. This was a knot that could never be untied. It's really you guys. At this moment, a shout sounded. When Qin Feiyang and the demon ancestor heard it, they hurriedly turned their heads and saw a black-clothed man flying over from afar like lightning. You've appeared so quickly? The 2 of them looked at each other and were caught off guard. Hua-Yi glanced at the black-clothed man, then looked at Qin Feiyang and the demon ancestor, and said suspiciously, He's Dong Xingyang? Qin Feiyang and the demon ancestor nodded. Dong Xingyang landed in front of Qin Feiyang and the other 2. He sized up Qin Feiyang and the demon ancestor and said with a smile, Long time no see. Long time no see. A smile also appeared on the demon ancestor's face. Qin Feiyang's expression was somewhat cold. Dong Xingyang also noticed Qin Feiyang's expression and said, Are you still fussing about the past? Chapter 23:14. Qin Feiyang said calmly, If it were you, would you let it go so quickly? No, but to be honest, I didn't do anything to hurt you back then. Dong Xingyang said, You attacking Tenwu and the Cerberus doesn't count? You used the Seal of Destiny to control us. Doesn't count? Also, if you didn't instigate Uncle Yuan, would the demon ancestor and Mu Tianyang be revived? Don't say you didn't do anything to hurt me. In my opinion, you deserve to be killed more than them, Qin Feiyang said expressionlessly. Dong Xingyang smiled bitterly and said, So you're here to kill me? Don't you have the Eye of Destiny? Don't you know why I'm here? Qin Feiyang said. The Eye of Destiny. Dong Xingyang shook his head and said, I'm in the ancient world. I don't dare to open the Eye of Destiny at all. Once I do, I'll be killed. Fatal disaster? Qin Feiyang was shocked and said, You're talking about the small beast. Yes. Dong Xingyang nodded. Qin Feiyang said in surprise, Is it also in the ancient world? I don't know, but I have a premonition that it has been secretly watching us. Dong Xingyang thought to himself. Qin Feiyang looked up at the sky. Was it really like what Dong Xingyang said? Had the small beast been secretly watching them? Did the separation of Dong Xingyang, Mu Tianyang, and the demon ancestor have something to do with the small beast? Oh no, there's danger. Let's go. Suddenly, Dong Xingyang's expression changed as he shouted. Danger? Qin Feiyang and the other two were stunned. They looked around and didn't see any experts. How could there be danger? Trust me. Follow me immediately. After Dong Xingyang finished speaking, he immediately activated a teleportation altar. What? He hurriedly said, Wait a moment, the universe ring and universe bag. The danger is getting closer and closer. If we don't leave now, it will be too late. Dong Xingyang shouted and jumped onto the altar without hesitation. Qin Feiyang and Fiend Ancestor looked at each other as they leaped onto the sacrificial altar. Although they didn't feel any danger, Dong Xingyang didn't seem to be scaring them. It was better to be careful. He frowned and reluctantly glanced at the universe rings and universe bags that were strewn all over the street. Then he jumped onto the altar. I'm telling you, if there's no danger, I'll definitely settle the score with you. He looked at Dong Xingyang and snorted coldly. There's no mistaking it, Dong Xingyang muttered. Suddenly he turned his head to look outside the city and shouted, They're here! Qin Feiyang and the other two also hurriedly left. Their complexions changed greatly. High up in the sky, outside the city, 5 figures were flying over like lightning. The leader was the woman from the dragons. The other 4 were also old acquaintances. The colorful woman from East Tomb's Heavenly Cloud Mountain, the pavilion master of the East Tomb Treasure Pavilion, the pavilion master of the North Region Treasure Pavilion, and Shangguan Fenglan's master, Elder Wei, the guardian of the 9 Heavens Palace. Fiend Ancestor said in surprise, They're all here. It's really not good. Hua-Yi murmured. Elder Wei and the other 3 also saw Qin Feiyang and the others and immediately shouted, They're there! Let's see how you escape today. The woman suddenly smiled coldly and shouted, Keep them here! Elder Wei and the other 3 immediately unleashed their fastest speed and charged towards Qin Feiyang and Qin Feiyang. You're really haunting us. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman and said coldly. The woman said, I told you, you can't escape. Then let's try. Qin Feiyang sneered. As soon as he finished speaking, the 4 of them immediately disappeared from the altar. It was also at this moment that Elder Wei's speed suddenly soared. Before the altar collapsed, he also entered the altar and disappeared. Damn it, the woman cursed. The colorful woman and the other 2 looked at each other and returned to the woman's side. They comforted her. Don't worry. Elder Wei has followed them in. He will definitely send us a message later. The woman nodded, her face extremely gloomy. Millions of miles away from Sky-Chi City, there was a vast sea. The surface of the sea was extremely calm, but danger lurked everywhere, because in the sea, the traces of sea beasts could be seen everywhere. They lurked motionlessly under the surface of the sea, as if waiting for their prey to come to them. Swish! In the sky above a certain shore, 5 figures met one after another. It was Qin Feiyang and the other 3, and Elder Wei. Qin Feiyang immediately looked at Elder Wei and asked, Elder Wei, why did you guys follow us? There's no other way. It's that woman's order. Elder Wei said helplessly. Then, how did she know we were in the western desert? Qin Feiyang frowned. She also doesn't know where you guys went, so she planned to split up and search. The 4 of us followed her to the western desert. As for Chou, Tianwei, Shen Qianshan, Elder Yu, and the Peak Master of Heavenly Cloud Mountain, they were ordered to go to the southern wilderness. Elder Wei said, I see. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. Elder Wei looked at Dong Jinyang and asked, Is he the person you're looking for? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. It's good that you found him. The Deputy Peak Master of Heavenly Cloud Mountain brought the heaven-punishing sword. We can't fight them head-on now. Leave the western desert immediately. Elder Wei said. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. The gate of time and space will only open tomorrow. There's no way to leave now. Hua Yi said. Why don't we go back and ask the Treasure Pavilion Master for help? That's a good idea. That woman is in Sky Chi City now. She won't know that we went to find the Treasure Pavilion Master. The demon ancestor nodded. Elder Wei said in a deep voice, There's no time to lose. Go quickly. What about you? How are we going to report to that woman later? Qin Feiyang looked at Elder Wei, his face full of worry. Elder Wei looked at Hua Yi and said, Injure me. Hua Yi was stunned. Hurry. Elder Wei urged. Then I'll offend you. Hua Yi made up his mind and slapped Elder Wei's lower abdomen. Boom! Elder Wei was immediately sent flying and crashed into a mountain ridge behind him. With a loud bang, the mountain ridge collapsed on the spot. A huge pit was also formed on the ground. Elder Wei, are you okay? Qin Feiyang and the other 3 hurriedly flew over and asked with concern. It's not enough. Again. Elder Wei said. Enough. Hua Yi frowned. Wishy-washy. Elder Wei glared at him. He raised his old hand and slapped the top of his head. With a crack, his skull shattered on the spot and blood splattered everywhere. Qin Feiyang and the other 3 looked at this scene in a daze. Go now. Elder Wei shouted. I'm sorry to have made you suffer. Qin Feiyang bowed deeply and decisively opened the altar. By the way, there's one more thing to tell you. That woman is the Princess of the Dragons, Long Zun's daughter. Elder Wei said. What? Long Zun's daughter. Qin Feiyang was shocked. Let's go. Elder Wei waved his hand. Qin Feiyang nodded and led Ancestor Mo and the other 2 onto the altar and disappeared. Don't fall into the hands of the dragons, Elder Wei muttered. When the altar dissipated, he took out the image crystal. Buzz! For phantoms appeared. It was the woman and the other 3. What happened? Looking at Elder Wei's bloody appearance, the woman raised her eyebrows. Elder Wei said, Princess, I'm sorry. They escaped. Escaped? The woman's eyebrows suddenly had a trace of hostility. Where are you now? Elder Wei gave the woman the coordinates. Very soon. The woman led the 3 women in colorful clothes to Elder Wei's side. Smack! Without saying a word, the woman directly slapped Elder Wei's face and scolded. You're really a useless piece of trash! Elder Wei lowered his head and didn't dare to say a word. His consciousness was also fainting. In order to make it more realistic, he used 90% of his strength to slap the top of his head, and it had already injured his divine soul. Princess, you can't blame Elder Wei. After all, Elder Wei is only a half-step indestructible, and Hua Yi's cultivation is only at the initial indestructible. The woman in colorful clothes, the Dongling Pavilion Master, and the Northern Region Pavilion Master all pleaded for Elder Wei. The woman shouted, Do you think this can make up for his mistakes? Hearing this, the 3 looked at each other and were quite anxious. It was also at this moment Elder Wei fell to the ground. The three's expressions changed, and they hurriedly surrounded him. The woman frowned and asked, "What's wrong?" The woman in colorful clothes said, "His divine soul is shattered." "How useless! Give him the divine soul pill. Then split up and go to the Western Desert Treasure Pavilion and the Sky Mystery Palace. Tell them to find these people for me." The woman shouted. "Yes." The three responded respectfully. Back to Qin Feiyang and the other three. At this moment, they had already arrived at the oasis. "The deputy pavilion master has already sent me a message and told me the situation. I guessed that you would come to me again. Come with me." The old man stood above the oasis, looking at Qin Feiyang and the other four. "Thank you." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and thanked him. Then he and the other three followed the old man into the oasis. Then they rushed into a secret passage and soon entered a secret chamber. In the center of the secret chamber, there was a huge altar. Where to next? He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Since we've found them, there's no need to go to the southern wilderness. Let's go directly to the northern region. After midnight, we'll set off for the divine land." Qin Feiyang said. He nodded and immediately urged his divine power to revive the altar. Qin Feiyang looked at the old man and said, "May I know your name, Senior?" The old man said, "Chou Tianxing." "Senior Chou, for your help today. I will definitely repay you in the future." Qin Feiyang bowed. "It's nothing." Chou Tianxing smiled faintly. Buzz. Soon, accompanied by a low rumbling sound, the altar shone brightly. "It's done." Yi turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang and said. Qin Feiyang stepped onto the altar and looked at Chou Tianxing. "Senior, we'll meet again." Yi and the other two stepped onto the altar one after another and smiled gratefully at Chou Tianxing. Then, the four figures quickly faded. The altar dimmed as well. "You must work hard. Don't let us down, and don't let us down," Chou Tianxing whispered. "Old Chou, come out quickly." At this moment, a slightly gloomy voice sounded outside. Chou Tianxing came back to his senses and immediately rushed out of the secret chamber and flew above the oasis. In the sky there were two people. It was the Dongling Pavilion Master and the Northern Region Pavilion Master. "Both of you, long time no see." Chou Tianxing smiled. "Yes, it has been a long time." The two smiled and said, telepathically, "Have they left?" "Yes, and I heard from Qin Feiyang that after midnight they were ready to go to divine land." Chou Tianxing said to himself, "It's good that they're gone. Let's go to Sky Chi City. The Princess of the Dragons is waiting for us." The two heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Chou Tianxing. The Princess of the Dragons. Chou Tianxing was shocked. "It's really her." The two nodded. "This is big, let's go quickly." Chou Tianxing murmured and quickly opened the altar. The three of them rushed up one after another and soon disappeared without a trace. Chapter 23:15. Northern Region. Above the valley, Qin Feiyang and the other three appeared out of thin air. That was close. Demon Ancestor patted his chest, his face full of fear. Qin Feiyang looked at the valley below and said, "This is the Pavilion Master's residence. We can't stay here for long." "Then why don't we go to the place where I usually meditate and lie low for a while?" He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Sure." Qin Feiyang nodded. Immediately, the four of them opened an altar and descended in the sky above a desert. Below there was a small oasis. The vegetation was lush and hundreds of flowers bloomed. Among the flowers and plants, there were lively little animals everywhere. This was the place that Yi had mentioned. Last time, he had also brought Qin Feiyang here. "I didn't expect that there would be a paradise in such a place." Dong Zhenyang glanced at the oasis and said with a smile. Yi smiled faintly. With a wave of his hand, a barrier immediately appeared above the oasis. "Let's go." The four of them entered the barrier. When the little animals inside saw that Hua-i had returned, they immediately rushed over from all directions. "Please go ahead." Hua-i looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two and said before flying towards the small wooden building below. Back then, Qin Feiyang had lived here for half a month, so he was naturally not unfamiliar with this place. Next to the small wooden building, there was a lake. It was about half a mile long, and the lake water was clear. Just like last time, they went to the lake to take a bath. The lake water was cold, and it was very comfortable to soak in it. About half an hour later, on the balcony on the second floor of the small wooden building, there was a tea table. On the tea table, there was a teapot that emitted a rich tea fragrance. Qin Feiyang, Dong Xingyang, and Demon Ancestor sat around the tea table, drinking tea comfortably. He was lying on the side, his face pale and his body twitching nonstop. This was the side effect of the heavenly dust divine pill. The demon ancestor looked at Hua-i and couldn't help but shiver. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "This side effect is too terrifying." Qin Feiyang laughed. Otherwise, why would he resist the heavenly dust divine pill so much? Demon ancestor shook his head and laughed. He sighed and said, "I wonder how Elder Wei and the others are doing now. This princess of the dragon's target is Qin Feiyang. I don't think she will make things difficult for them." Dong Xingyang said. During this hour, Qin Feiyang had already told Dong Xingyang the general situation. Therefore, as for the dragons, as well as the situation in the northern region and the eastern tomb, he had more or less learned about it. Qin Feiyang suddenly looked at Dong Xingyang and asked, "How did you sense the danger?" The demon ancestor also looked at him curiously. This time, if not for Dong Xingyang foreseeing the danger ahead of time, they would definitely have suffered greatly in the western desert. Dong Xingyang said, "The Eye of Destiny." The demon ancestor said suspiciously, "Didn't you say that you didn't dare to activate the Eye of Destiny in the ancient world?" "I didn't activate it. The Eye of Destiny has the ability to predict danger. In other words, even if I don't activate the Eye of Destiny, as long as danger appears, I can sense it in advance." Dong Xingyang said. "I see." Qin Feiyang and Dong Xingyang were enlightened. Dong Xingyang raised his teacup and took a sip. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Is everyone okay?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Who?" Dong Xingyang said, "Qin Yuan, your parents, and she. When we left, everyone was fine." "As for her, she's fine too?" Qin Feiyang said. The she that Dong Xingyang was talking about was the guardian of the forgotten continent, the snow python. Actually, my motive for coming to the ancient world is very simple: to remove her seal and let her return to her white dragon body. Dong Xingyang said softly. "Return to her white dragon body," Qin Feiyang muttered. "I've heard Uncle Yuan talk about you guys. You used to be a winged dragon. The snow python used to be a white dragon. The two of you used to be a couple. However, because of your battle soul, the Eye of Destiny, it was attacked by the small beast. Because the white dragon made a huge mistake, the small beast used its great powers to turn her into a snow python. Furthermore, she will never be able to return to her white dragon body. To be honest, I know the abilities of the small beast too well. If you want her to return to her white dragon body, it will be harder than reaching the heavens." Qin Feiyang said. Dong Xingyang clenched his fists, and a cold light surged in his eyes. He said, "Therefore, I want to kill it." "Kill it?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He shook his head and said, "It's easier said than done. However, from the looks of it, our goals are the same." "You want to kill it too?" Dong Xingyang was surprised. It snatched Chang Shui, sealed the ancient castle, and killed the inner demons and big cousin. "How can I let it go?" Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. "What?" Dong Xingyang suddenly stood up and said in disbelief, "The inner demons and Lu Jijin are dead." "Yes, They died at the third level of the divine level. Qin Feiyang said, "How is that possible? I once used the Eye of Destiny to peek at their fates. Although they will experience many hardships, they will definitely not die." "Did you make a mistake?" Dong Jingyang said. "I don't want to believe it either. However, this is what the guardian of the miracle, the fire python, told me personally." Qin Feiyang said. Dong Jingyang frowned and said, "Then did you see their corpses with your own eyes?" "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "No," Dong Jingyang muttered. He returned to the chair and suddenly said, "Let me go to the Black Tortoise world." "Why are you going to the Black Tortoise world?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Dong Jingyang said, "The Black Tortoise world is an independent small world. It should be able to block the small beast senses. I want to see their fates again." "Okay." Qin Feiyang immediately stood up. He was actually unwilling to believe that the inner demons and big cousin were dead. The demon ancestor hurriedly said, "Wait, wait." The two of them looked at him suspiciously. The demon ancestor looked at Dong Jingyang and said, "From what you said before, you can't be sure if the Black Tortoise world can block the small beast senses." Dong Jingyang nodded. "Then have you ever thought about what if it can't be blocked? How big of a disaster will that bring us? I don't think we should gamble with our lives." The demon ancestor said. Dong Jingyang frowned. "Let's put it this way. If the inner demons and Lu Jejin are really dead, then what we're doing is meaningless. And if they're still alive, even if we don't look for them, they'll come looking for us sooner or later. So I personally don't think there's a need to take this risk." The demon ancestor looked at the two of them and said, "Fine." Qin Feiyang sighed and returned to the chair. His face was full of disappointment. Dong Jingyang didn't say anything else, because what the demon ancestor said made sense. If their opponent was someone else, they could take the risk. But their opponent was the golden small beast. Once it discovered them, it would be useless no matter who came. They would definitely die. "Trust me, the Eye of Destiny won't be wrong. They're definitely still alive." Looking at the disappointed Qin Feiyang, Dong Jingyang said, "It really won't be wrong?" Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at Dong Jingyang. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Yes." Dong Jingyang nodded. Qin Feiyang said, "If they're not dead, are they still in the third level?" "You'll have to ask your ancestor, because your ancestor went to the third level before." Dong Jingyang said, "Yes, back then in the deepest part of the Heavenly Dragon Sea. How could I forget to ask about this?" Qin Feiyang slapped his head. His ancestor had entered the third level before, but now he appeared in the ancient world. This meant that there was definitely a passage between the third level and the ancient world. Perhaps the inner demons and Lu Jejin were also in the ancient world. But there was another problem. If the inner demons were still alive, why couldn't he sense the existence of the inner demons? "Don't think about it. There are some things that you won't understand. Let nature take its course," the demon ancestor advised. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the demon ancestor. He sighed softly and picked up his teacup. He lowered his head and drank mouthful after mouthful. The demon ancestor and Dong Jingyang looked at each other and chose to remain silent. It was useless for others to comfort them. They had to learn to let it go. Time passed quickly. The side effects of the heavenly dust divine pill were over. He was full of energy again. Rest well. Before entering the divine lands, there will definitely be a tough battle. After saying this, Yi left alone. He didn't say where he was going. Qin Feiyang also calmed down. He nodded and said, "Yes, there's still a tough battle. We have to be prepared." Although the fire dragon was dead, the dragons would definitely send someone else to guard the entrance to the divine lands. And if they wanted to enter the divine lands, they must first defeat this guardian. Perhaps, this time, they would have to face more than one guardian. After all, with the lesson from last time, it was possible that the dragons would send more people. Hearing Qin Feiyang and Dong Jingyang's words, the demon ancestor and Dong Jingyang looked at each other and couldn't help but worry. Chapter 23:16. In the evening, Qin Feiyang sat alone on the balcony, drinking tea. As for the demon ancestor and Dong Jingyang, they had already gone to the castle. He also came back. As he walked, he hummed a little tune. He was proud of his success and was full of smiles. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, "Why are you so happy?" "Of course it's a good thing." He glanced at him and laughed. "Nonsense. Of course I know it's a good thing. What I'm asking is, what good thing is it?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. "Guess." He looked at him mysteriously. "Not interested. Forget it if you don't want to say it." Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. Okay. I'll say it. It's because of Lan What he said. Shangguan Fenglan. Qin Feiyang was stunned, and a thought suddenly crawled up in his mind. He said in surprise, "She can't be." "That's right. Under my unremitting efforts and sincere pursuit, Lan was finally moved by me, opened her heart, and accepted me." He laughed. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Really?" "Nonsense. How can I joke about this kind of thing? Just now I hugged her for a while. Now my hands still have her scent. It's so fragrant." He lowered his head and looked at his hands, his face full of intoxication. Qin Feiyang twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "Then don't wash your hands in the future." "That's what I think. Don't wash your hands for at least 10 years. He said. "You're incurable." Qin Feiyang shook his head. However, it was really unexpected that Shangguan Fenglan would agree. "Wait." Suddenly, Qin Feiyang was stunned. He lowered his head and pondered for a while. He looked at Hui and asked, "Does she know that we're going to divine land?" "She knows." Hui nodded. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "I understand." "What do you understand?" Hui looked at him suspiciously. "She must have seen that you were about to die, so she pretended to be touched and accepted you, lest you die with regrets." Qin Feiyang said, "Get lost. We haven't even set off and you're already cursing me to death. What kind of person are you?" "I think you're just jealous." Hui said angrily. Qin Feiyang said, "It's not like I don't have someone I like. Why should I envy you?" He looked at the night sky and laughed foolishly. "But in my eyes, that little fish of yours can't even compare to Lan." "Can't compare." Qin Feiyang was stunned. He shook his head and said, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." Hui immediately fiercely glared at Qin Feiyang and said, "I'll tell you, you can talk about me, but if you want to talk about Lan, I'm not done with you." "What did I say?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Hui said angrily, "You said that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Aren't you implying that Lan can't compare to the mermaid princess?" "I'm really convinced." Okay. You can compare. Qin Feiyang was helpless to the extreme. He said, "Not only can you compare, but the difference is like heaven and earth." Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded repeatedly. Not only was there no cure for this fellow, but he was also possessed by the devil. He smiled proudly and said, "Let's stop fooling around and get down to business. Princess Dragons has left." "Left?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Yes. I heard from Lan that not long after we left the Western Desert, the princess activated the space-time transmission artifact and left." Hui said, "She went back to the Divine Land?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Definitely. I just don't know why she went back to the Divine Land." Hui said, "What else can she do? It's definitely not a good thing." Qin Feiyang sneered and asked, "What about Old Wei and the others? Did they withdraw?" "They withdrew in the afternoon, but Old Wei suffered a little grievance." Hui said, What grievance? Qin Feiyang frowned. He was slapped by princess dragons. If it weren't for the pavilion master and the others pleading for mercy, Old Wei would probably be dead. Hua Yi said in a deep voice, "This damn woman. I must make her pay double for the grievances Old Wei suffered." Qin Feiyang's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. "Let's talk about it when you have the ability." Hua Yi glanced at him and said, "There is one more thing. Lan has not given up on helping you find Tan Wu and the others. Just yesterday, the law enforcers of Ninth Heaven Palace saw Tan Wu and the Cerberus outside." Qin Feiyang was taken aback and asked quickly, "Where are they?" "Hua," he said, "with Lin Yi." Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Why are they with Lin Yi?" "How would I know?" Hua Yi rolled his eyes. Qin Feiyang smiled, pondered for a while, and said, "This is also a good thing." "It must be a good thing. Lin Yi's master is so strong. Who dares to bully them with him?" Hua Yi said, "Then it seems that I don't have to worry about them." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "What about Fire Qilin and Uncle Divine Beast?" "There's no news about them for a long time." Hua Yi shook his head. "Where are they? Now I don't have time to find them. I just hope that they can be safe." Qin Feiyang sighed. "Even Ninth Heaven Palace can't find them. What's the use of you looking for them?" After Hua Yi finished speaking, he took out 2 pots of celestial immortal wine. Last time, he bought a total of 10 pots of celestial immortal wine. He gave Zhang Xiaoyang 2 pots. Hua Yi drank 1 pot. There were 7 pots left. "How about it? Want to drink some?" Hua Yi smiled. Qin Feiyang said, "Is it to celebrate our entry into divine land in advance?" "Wrong. It's to celebrate our death in advance." Hua Yi said. Qin Feiyang laughed and said, "In that case, I really have to drink. Otherwise, I won't have a chance. It's good that you know." Hua Yi threw a pot to Qin Feiyang and asked, "By the way, where are Demon Ancestor and Dong Zhengyang?" "They went to the castle. They said that they can't help anyway, so they won't cause trouble for us outside." Qin Feiyang said, "They are quite tactful." Hua Yi chuckled, opened the wine pot, raised his head and took a big gulp. He asked, "Have you thought about how to deal with Zhang Xiaoyang?" "I really haven't thought about it. Now that he knows everything, I'm really worried about leaving him in the 4 major regions. But if we bring him to Divine Land, I feel that it will be another trouble." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Let's just kill him." Hua Yi said. Hearing Hua Yi's words, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was in the castle, couldn't help but tremble. "It's okay, don't worry." The demon ancestor patted his shoulder and comforted him. Then he sent a voice transmission to Qin Feiyang. "Bring him with you to the Divine Prefecture. At that time he will follow me. He will not cause you any trouble." "Okay." Qin Feiyang secretly agreed. Accompanied by the fragrance of wine and laughter, dawn finally arrived. Qin Feiyang raised his head and drank the last mouthful of wine. He put down the wine pot and said, "Let's go." Hua Yi also slowly got up and glanced at the small animals sleeping peacefully. He whispered, "I hope it's not an eternal farewell. Whether it's an eternal farewell or a temporary one, as long as you try, you won't regret it." Qin Feiyang smiled and took out a heavenly dust divine pill and handed it to Hua Yi. Hua Yi retracted his gaze and looked at Qin Feiyang. Then he resolutely grabbed the heavenly dust divine pill and placed it in his bosom. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a space-time gate appeared. He smiled and said, "Are you ready?" "Of course. My blood is already boiling." Hua Yi laughed, full of pride. Qin Feiyang was also infected. A powerful battle intent rose from his body. He laughed and said, "Then let's do it." Divine power surged out and poured into the space-time gate. Clang! The space-time gate immediately expanded in the wind, emitting a dazzling divine light. Soon, the space-time gate opened and a vast aura surged out. Qin Feiyang and Hua looked at each other and stepped into the space-time gate without hesitation. Sky Dragon Sea. In the deepest part, on the surface of the sea, the wind whistled and the waves covered the sky. The sea at night was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. Numerous powerful sea beasts were searching for prey in the dark night, fighting and roaring at each other. Clang! Suddenly, in the sky above the sea, there was a deafening explosion. All the sea beasts that were fighting immediately stopped and looked up at the sky. An ancient door gradually appeared in the air. Following that, 2 figures walked out. It's them. Qin Feiyang, what yi? The nearby sea beasts suddenly changed their expressions. Last time, Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi fought a fierce battle with the fire dragon here, and then fought with the ancestral dragon. This matter had already spread wildly among the sea beasts. The sea beasts in this area put the 2 on the list of people that they absolutely could not provoke. So when they saw the 2 appear, they immediately dived into the sea and fled in fear. Did you see that? Facts have proven that you are too ferocious. Even the sea beasts don't dare to provoke you. What Yi said. Shouldn't the person they are afraid of be you? Qin Feiyang said. Hua Yi laughed and said, Of course. It has a little to do with me. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and looked at the deeper part of the sea. Those 2 eyes were like stars, flashing with resplendent divine light. The corner of Hua Yi's mouth raised, rolled up Qin Feiyang, and turned into a stream of light, shuttling through the night sky and rushing deeper. Chapter 23:17. Deeper in the sea. The howling of the wind and the rolling of the waves were as deafening as the rumbling of thunder. Amidst the strong winds and huge waves, a huge stone door was suspended above the sea. The stone door was about a few hundred feet tall. It was engraved with divine dragon patterns. There was a golden dragon, a fire dragon, a water dragon, and so on. They were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as if they were real. But the stone door only had a door frame and no door. On the other side of the stone door was a vast sea. Moreover, the sea on the other side was extremely calm, without any wind or waves. The sky was also cloudless. Whether it was the moon or the stars, they could all be seen clearly. On one side there were strong winds and huge waves, dark clouds covering the sky, and it was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. On the other side it was calm, the moon hung high in the sky, and the stars twinkled. The stone door above the sea was like a barrier that divided heaven and earth into 2 halves. In front of the stone door, 2 burly men sat cross-legged in the void. They both had long, fiery red hair, and the aura they exuded was also extremely terrifying. Both of them had their eyes closed, and their faces were calm, but the void around them was distorted and trembling. This was because their aura was so strong that even the void could not withstand it. About half an hour passed. Whoosh! Suddenly, the 2 men suddenly opened their eyes, and 2 fiery red beams of light burst out of their eyes. They looked at the sea in front of them, and a cold look appeared on their faces. Whoosh! At the same time, 2 figures flashed through the air like lightning. They were 2 young men. They were in their 20s. One was dressed in white, and the other was like fire. They did not hide their aura at all. That's right. The 2 of them were Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi. Look. Hua Yi pointed at the stone door, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Qin Feiyang also noticed it, and he also noticed that on the other side of the stone door there was a clear night sky and a calm sea. Looks like that's the entrance to the divine land. Looking at the stone door, Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Then he looked at the 2 burly men sitting cross-legged in front of the stone door, and his pupils immediately shrank. Their aura was very strong. 2-peak 9th heaven realm. As we expected, there is more than one person guarding here. What Yi said. Qin Feiyang turned his gaze to the void ahead and muttered, Perhaps there are still things we can't see. What I can't see, What Yi whispered. The meaning of his words was very clear. It was very likely that there were other people hiding here. Qin Feiyang Hui. The two tall and sturdy men also recognized Qin Feiyang. They immediately stood up, and a terrifying aura rolled out. Charge! A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes. The corner of Hua Yi's mouth rose slightly. Boom! Divine power roared like a flood, instantly covering the sky and surging toward the two of them. The two of them turned pale with fright. Without looking back, they entered the stone door and appeared on the other side of the sea. Rumble! Hua Yi's divine power also blasted into the stone door. Immediately, a shocking scene appeared. A milky white light screen suddenly appeared on the originally empty stone door. The light screen had actually blocked Hua Yi's divine power. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi's faces suddenly became solemn. The aura emitted by this light screen was almost the same as Long Zun's. Obviously, this light screen was set up by Long Zun. In other words, if they wanted to enter the divine land, they first had to break through this light screen. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "Look at the void next to the stone door." Hua Yi nodded and waved his hand again and again, for waves of divine power swept out one after another, blasting into the void above, below, left, and right of the stone door. Rumble! Accompanied by a series of loud sounds, the light screens flickered in the void. After blocking Hua Yi's divine power, they quickly disappeared into the void. Don't bother. The entire divine land is shrouded in a barrier. If you want to enter the divine land, you can only go through the 4 entrances. But now the 4 entrances are in a sealed state. Only we dragons can enter and exit freely. So, you will never be able to enter. The 2 tall and sturdy men stood opposite, looking at Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi with sneers on their faces. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice, "Try it from the bottom of the sea." Whoop! He immediately entered the sea. Rumble! Soon, ear-shattering noises came from the sea. Not long after, Hua Yi flew out and shook his head. "No, there is also a barrier in the sea." Qin Feiyang said, "Then it seems that we can only enter from this entrance." Entrance! Hua Yi glanced at the stone door and sent a sound transmission. The entrance was sealed by Long Zun. I have no way to break it, unless I have a heaven-defying divine artifact. Heaven-defying divine artifact. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. This Long Zun was too cautious. Wait, only dragons could enter and exit freely. That's right. He had the power of the purple gold dragon blood, which was no different from the divine dragons. Since the dragons could enter and exit freely, then he should be able to as well. With that thought in mind, Qin Feiyang immediately leaned over to Hua Yi's ear and whispered a few words. "Is it okay?" After Hua Yi heard this, he looked at him in a daze. "How would I know if I don't try?" Qin Feiyang secretly said something, then sent Hua Yi to the castle, and then walked towards the stone door. What is he going to do? I don't know. The 2 burly men looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang stood in front of the stone door, looking at the void inside the stone door, took a deep breath, then raised his arm and slowly extended it towards the stone door. Buzz! The light curtain appeared again. Qin Feiyang did not stop, and his fingertips reached towards the light curtain. Finally, his fingertips and the light curtain touched together. But unexpectedly, the light curtain immediately emerged with a repulsive force, shaking Qin Feiyang back. Why can't it work? In any case, I can be considered half a divine dragon. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Half a divine dragon? The light curtain did not have a soundproof effect, and the 2 burly men heard it clearly and immediately understood. On their faces, there was also a sneer. Although you have the power of the purple gold dragon blood, you have not signed a fate contract. In short, Only by signing a fake contract can you freely enter and exit. The two burly men sneered. So that's how it is, Qin Feiyang muttered, and with a wave of his hand, Hua-yi appeared again. It seems that I can only break it by force. This matter depends on you. Hua-yi said. I'm afraid I can't do it either. You also saw it when I fought with Long Zun's clone last time. Even if it's the slaughter domain, in front of her it's nothing. Qin Feiyang shook his head. You still have some self-awareness. Before his voice faded, an ice-cold and bone-piercing voice suddenly rang out from behind Qin Feiyang and his companion. Following closely, a woman appeared in the void behind Qin Feiyang and Qin Yu. This voice, Qin Feiyang and Hua-yi quickly turned their heads to look, and their faces suddenly changed. Sure enough, it was that woman, the daughter of Long Zun, the princess of the dragons. Qin Feiyang pretended to ask, Who the hell are you? There was a need to ask, because this woman's identity was only known to Old Wei and the others. If she didn't pretend to ask, she would definitely suspect that Old Wei and the others had tipped him off. Who am I? Princess of the Dragons murmured, a trace of pride appearing on her face, and said, Soon you will know who I am. Come out. As her voice fell, figures appeared out of thin air beside Princess of the Dragons. Qin Feiyang and Hua-yi turned pale with fright. There were a total of 4 people. A burly man like a giant and an old man covered in a black robe. The other 2, like them, were both young men. One had blonde hair, the other had silver hair. They were about 8 meters tall, handsome, tall and straight, and had an extremely outstanding temperament. Although they looked young, the aura exuded by the 2 was not inferior to the burly man and the black-robed old man. As for the burly man and the black-robed old man, Qin Feiyang and Hua-yi were no strangers. They were the ancestral dragon of the Fire Dragon clan and the ancestral dragon of the Black Dragon clan. Obviously, the blonde and silver-haired youth must also be the ancestral dragon of a clan. Greetings, Your Highness. As soon as the 4 of them appeared, they bowed and said respectfully, Your Highness. Qin Feiyang and Hua-yi looked at the woman in surprise. Yes, I am the Princess of the Dragons. The woman looked at the 2 and said proudly. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, So, you are Long Zun's daughter? Yes, the woman said. I was wondering why Xin Qianshan and the others were so respectful to you. So you are Long Zun's daughter. This face now shouldn't be your real face, Qin Feiyang said. Since she was pretending to be the hostess, she must have changed her appearance. Yes, the woman nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman curiously and said, Then what do you look like? You actually have the mood to care about what I look like. Have you not figured out your current situation? The woman was stunned. Qin Feiyang laughed. Princess of the Dragons, such a powerful figure. Of course, I am curious. Still laughing? The Princess of the Dragons was speechless. This guy's courage was indeed not something an ordinary person could compare to. All right, consider it as me talking too much. Qin Feiyang shook his head, looked at the black-robed old man and the burly man, and said with a smile, The 2 of you, long time no see, how have you been? The 2 of them were silent, and their eyes were extremely gloomy. Why do you all dislike me so much? Qin Feiyang was helpless. The Princess of the Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a frown, Are you really not nervous at all? Why should I be nervous? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. All right, let me introduce you. The Black Dragon God and the Fire Dragon God. You have already met, so I won't say much. These 2 are also my dragons, ancestral dragons. They are the ancestral dragon of the Golden Dragon clan and the ancestral dragon of the Silver Dragon clan. The Princess of the Dragons pointed to the blonde and silver-haired young man, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, The 4 ancestral dragons are standing in front of you, and you are not nervous? I really admire your courage. You flatter me. Actually, it's like this. This time, I brought Huai here to seek refuge with you dragons. Qin Feiyang laughed. Seek refuge? The princess of the dragons was stunned. The black-robed old man immediately said, Your Highness, this person is full of tricks. Don't be deceived by him. I'm telling the truth. I'm not lying to you. After these few battles with you dragons, I deeply realized that with the ability of us ordinary people, it's impossible for us to be a match for you dragons. That's why I've decided to turn over a new leaf and join the dragon race, as long as you don't deprive me of my bloodline power. Qin Feiyang sighed and said so seriously that even Huai almost believed him. Chapter 2318. Really? Princess Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, More real than real gold? Qin Feiyang nodded. Okay. Princess Dragon smiled. The black-robed old man said again, Your Highness, this is definitely his scheme. Don't fall for it. Qin Feiyang coldly snorted. Don't measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. You are a gentleman? The black-robed old man was so angry that he laughed. I don't dare to say that I am a gentleman, but at least I won't be as despicable as you. Qin Feiyang said calmly. The black-robed old man blew his beard and said angrily, How am I despicable? Qin Feiyang said, You used the people of Sky Dragon City to threaten me. Isn't that despicable? That's because they deserve to die. The black-robed old man sneered. Qin Feiyang said, Then in my opinion, you deserve to die too. The black-robed old man clenched his fists, his eyes filled with terrifying killing intent. But without Princess Dragons saying anything, he didn't dare to do anything. Princess Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. It's not hard for me to believe you. I have a divine technique. If you obediently let me control you, I will let bygones be bygones and bring you to divine prefecture. Control? Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head. That won't do. If I am controlled by you, do I still have a choice? Even if you want to kill me, I can only stare. If I wanted to kill you, you would have been finished in the Heaven Immortal Tower. Princess Dragons said. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated. Princess Dragons said, This is my only condition and also my last patience for you. Think about it carefully. Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, What kind of divine technique is it? Princess Dragon said, Just controlling your soul, nothing else. Are you sure? Qin Feiyang asked. Of course. Is there a need to lie to you? Princess Dragon said. Let's take a gamble. Qin Feiyang hardened his heart. He looked at Princess Dragons and said, I also have a condition. As long as you agree, I will immediately let you control me. What conditions? Princess Dragons asked. Qin Feiyang looked at Huai, then looked at Princess Dragons and said, You can only control me. Sure. Princess Dragons nodded without hesitation. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered as he looked at Huai and said with a smile, You go to the castle first. What are you trying to do? Huai didn't dare to send a sound transmission, nor did he dare to ask. He only suspiciously looked at Qin Feiyang, hoping that Qin Feiyang would understand what he meant. Qin Feiyang smiled and sent Huai to the castle. Then he looked at Princess Dragons and said, I hope you keep your word. Come. Princess Dragons formed a seal with both hands. In just an instant, a milky white mark appeared. Princess, are you really going to let him go? The black-robed old man and the other three looked at her. What are you guys in such a hurry for? After I control him, I'll have the final say on how to deal with him. Princess Dragons secretly said, her tone carrying a trace of displeasure. Princess is wise. The four of them suddenly realized and laughed secretly. You dare to lie to me. I will definitely make him pay the price. Princess Dragons secretly sneered. The mark immediately turned into a stream of light and rushed into the top of Qin Feiyang's head. A tearing pain suddenly swept out. However, Qin Feiyang didn't even frown. Soon, the pain disappeared. Qin Feiyang also immediately felt that there was an additional shackle on his soul. Pow! Without saying a word, Princess Dragons directly stepped forward and slapped Qin Feiyang's face. "What are you doing?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. Princess Dragon sneered. 2 days ago, you lied to me in the Tianluo Sea. You should be punished." With that, another slap was sent towards Qin Feiyang's face. Qin Feiyang's eyes turned cold. He raised his arm like lightning and grabbed Princess Dragon's wrist. But before he could grab it, the milky white light reappeared, preventing Qin Feiyang from approaching. Pow! A crisp sound of a slap was heard. Qin Feiyang's face was burning with pain, his face gloomy to the extreme. "Don't move again. Now, as long as I want to, I can erase your soul, understand?" Princess Dragons looked at him contemptuously. "All right, hit me as you wish, as long as you can calm down." Qin Feiyang simply put his face forward. Princess Dragons raised her eyebrows. Almost everyone had a common problem. The more the other party resisted, the more excited they were. Just like Qin Feiyang right now. If he showed that he was not convinced or would rather die than submit, Princess Dragons would definitely continue to torture him. On the contrary, if the other party were to resign himself to it, then it would become boring. "Not going to hit me? I see that you still haven't calmed down. Come on, I'm thick-skinned anyway." Qin Feiyang said. "You're really thick-skinned." Princess Dragons coldly snorted, looked at the black-robed old man and the other three and shouted, "Return to the dragons!" Yes, the 4 of them respectfully replied. After being controlled by Princess Dragons, the 4 of them heaved a sigh of relief. But at the same time, there was a trace of ridicule in his eyes. "Do you think that by doing this, the dragons will really let you go? Ridiculous. When you see Longzuin, you will know how naive this idea is." Princess Dragons took a step forward, crossed the stone door, and appeared in the sky above the sea on the other side. "Greetings, Your Highness." The 2 burly men immediately knelt in the air and saluted. Princess Dragons nodded and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. "Let's go." The black-robed old man pushed Qin Feiyang from behind. "How do I get in?" Qin Feiyang said. The black-robed old man said, "Just walk in." Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and asked, "Are you sure I can walk in now?" "Nonsense. Do you know what Her Highness controlled you just now?" "That's the destiny contract," the black-robed old man said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. So this is the so-called destiny contract. Originally, he thought that this was just a simple contract that could sense the other party's life and death. But he didn't expect that it could also control the soul. It seems that even Shangguan Qiu's master didn't know much about dragons. But thinking about it, this dragon's people were really pitiful. They were controlled from birth. No wonder they were so united. If they weren't united, they would die. Who wants to die? No one wants to. Qin Feiyang shook his head and dispelled these messy thoughts. He took a step forward and stepped through the stone door. The light screen didn't appear again. He had successfully stepped into the border of Divine Land. This place was also the border of Divine Land. The black-robed old man and the other 3 followed closely behind. "I'm finally in," looking at the sea in front of him and the bright moon and stars in the sky. Qin Feiyang was very excited. Although his ancestors repeatedly told him to break through to the 9th Heaven's realm before entering Divine Land, his desire and yearning for Divine Land couldn't wait until then. Don't be like a country bumpkin. Divine Land is similar to other places. They are strong and weak. Of course. In Divine Land, no matter how strong someone is, he wouldn't dare to provoke us dragons. We dragons are the masters of Divine Land. Princess Dragons said proudly. Masters, Qin Feiyang murmured, looked at princess dragons and smiled. What about my ancestors? A cold light flashed in Princess Dragon's eyes. The black-robed old man and the others also had a trace of anger on their faces. Qin Feiyang laughed. It seems that my ancestors are an exception. Princess Dragon sneered. Don't think too highly of your ancestors. He can only hide in the dark and jump a few times. But at least he dares to jump under your nose, and you can't do anything about it. Qin Feiyang joked. Do you want to die? The dragon princess seemed to have been hit in her vitals. She looked at Qin Feiyang angrily. No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then shut up, Princess Dragon said. Okay, I'll shut up. Qin Feiyang waved his hand again and again, but there was a flash of light in the depths of his eyes. Slave seal, don't let me down. With a thought, the slave seal was activated and went straight to his divine soul. Boom! Immediately, there was a loud explosion in his sea of consciousness. The invisible shackles on his divine soul shattered on the spot. Puff! At the same time, Princess Dragons spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face couldn't help but turn pale. What's going on? Princess Dragons was surprised. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang took a step and instantly appeared dozens of miles away. He then turned to look at Princess Dragons and laughed. Do you think I can really control me? You! Princess Dragons stared at Qin Feiyang in shock and anger. Your Highness, what happened? The black-robed old man and the other three, as well as the two burly men guarding the stone door, were also surprised. Princess Dragons said, He forcefully broke the control of the fate contract. What? The 6 of them were stunned. Slave seal, thank you so much, Qin Feiyang muttered, and with a wave of his hand, Hui immediately appeared and shouted, Let's go! Little beauty, thank you for bringing us into divine land. See you later. Hui laughed out loud. Then he brought Qin Feiyang along and casually found a direction. Without even looking back, they flew into the sky. You lied to me again. This is unforgivable. Kill them for me. Princess Dragons was so angry that she gritted her teeth, her face ferocious. This was not the first time he lied to her. With her shout, the black-robed old man and the other 3 looked at each other and immediately teleported, chasing after Qin Feiyang. Their speed was countless times faster than Hui's. Hui was proud, but when he sensed the aura of the 4 people, the smile on his face suddenly froze. Still laughing? Qin Feiyang glanced at him. Hui was quite embarrassed. Previously, when he saw Princess Dragons being played by Qin Feiyang, he was so proud that he forgot about the cultivation of the 4 ancestral dragons. The cultivation of these 4 people was far beyond him. Even if he successfully entered Divine Land, it would be difficult for him to escape safely. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the 4 and said in a deep voice, You stay outside! After saying that, he left the Azure Phoenix sword and disappeared without waiting for Hui's response. Fuck! Why am I so useless? Hui was furious. These were the 4 ancestral dragons. Moreover, each of them had a heaven-defying artifact. Leaving him outside was the same as sending him to his death. Before he could complain, he took the Azure Phoenix sword and fled frantically. Don't chase him. Break Qin Feiyang's spatial artifact for me. Princess Dragons saw this and shouted at the 4. The 4 originally wanted to chase after Hui, but when they heard this, they immediately stopped and scanned the void. Chapter 2319. At the same time, Princess Dragons rushed to the side of the 4, her eyes emitting a milky white light. At this moment, her eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. She immediately pointed to a spot on the left and shouted, The spatial divine object is there! You can really see it? Hui was shocked and immediately turned around, shouting, Let that young man go! Come at me! Accompanied by a clanging sound, the azure phoenix sword recovered and slashed towards the 5 people. The sharp edge tore through the sky, setting off huge waves. Trash! The black-robed old man turned to look at Hui, his old face full of contempt. With a wave of his old hand, a wave of divine power emerged and pounced towards Hui. You are the trash. Your entire clan is trash. Hui was furious. Holding the azure phoenix, sword with both hands, he slashed at the divine power. Boom! Clang! The two met, and a destructive wave immediately rolled out. Puff! Hui spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot and flew out. The azure phoenix, sword in his hand, also flew out. Do you see that? This is the gap between you and me. If this sovereign wants to kill you, it will be as easy as flipping my hand. The black-robed old man said disdainfully. Hui stabilized his body, recalled the azure phoenix sword, and provoked. Then come if you have the guts. Princess Dragons raised her eyebrows and said, Annoying, send him directly to hell. Yes, the black-robed old man respectfully responded, a cruel smile on his face, and swept towards Hui. Princess Dragons looked at the burly man and the other 2 and said angrily, What are you looking at? Hurry up and do it for me. Yes, yes, yes. The 3 of them responded and urged their divine power. What kind of scene was it when the 3 great ancestral dragons attacked together? The world suddenly trembled. The sea surged, covering the sky and the moon. Break! The 3 of them shouted. The power of the 3 divine dragons, carrying the power to destroy the world, blasted towards the ancient castle. With a loud bang, the ancient castle was blasted away. However, there was no damage. Princess Dragons raised her eyebrows and shouted at the 3 of them, Revive the heaven-defying artifact for me! What? Revive the heaven-defying artifact. When Hui heard this voice, his face couldn't help but turn pale. You still have time to worry about him? The black-robed old man sneered. His speed reached the limit as he instantly appeared in front of Hui and slapped out with his palm. Hui hurriedly placed the azure phoenix sword in front of him. Clang! The black-robed old man's palm landed on the azure phoenix sword, and the azure phoenix sword actually broke on the spot. Hui's body also violently shook. Blood gushed out from his body as he crashed into the sea below like a meteor. You're worse than trash, the black-robed old man sneered. At the same time, a series of destructive auras suddenly appeared, causing the ocean and the sky to tremble. A crimson divine bow suddenly appeared in the burly man's hand. This was the sunset divine bow that Qin Feiyang had broken. At the same time, the golden-haired young man and the silver-haired young man both had a god weapon floating in front of them. The divine weapon in front of the golden-haired young man was a golden battle sword. It was 3 fingers wide and 1 meter long. It looked like it was made of gold, and it emitted a dazzling divine light. In front of the silver-haired young man was a silver iron hammer. The round iron hammer was covered with sharp blades, and its sharpness was bone-piercing. The aura emitted by these 2 divine weapons was not any weaker than the sunset divine bow. 3 heaven-defying divine weapons. Inside the ancient castle, the devil ancestor and the others couldn't help but panic. Although they couldn't see the situation outside, they could hear the voice of the princess dragons. And from the aura emitted by the 3 divine weapons, they could also tell. Could the ancient castle withstand 3 heaven-defying divine weapons? The princess dragons shouted, Smash it for me! The 3 nodded and their eyes flashed. The 3 heaven-defying divine weapons bombarded the ancient castle at the same time. Rumble! Accompanied by a loud explosion, the ancient castle was once again blasted away. The devil ancestor and the others inside the ancient castle suddenly felt the world spinning, and their blood surged. In the end, they all spurted out blood. What should we do? Zhang Xiaoyang's face was pale. He really shouldn't have followed these people to the divine land. 3 heaven-defying divine weapons for great dragons and a terrifying princess dragons. The most important thing was that they were now in the divine land, the territory of the dragons. Was there any way to survive? The white-eyed wolf also ran out of the cultivation room and shouted, "Little Qinzi, quickly let us go to the black tortoise realm to hide. If this goes on, we will be shaken to death." Clang! Before he finished speaking, the 3 heaven-defying divine weapons attacked again. The ancient castle, which had not yet calmed down, once again shook violently. The deafening noise directly tore the eardrums of the white-eyed wolf, the devil ancestor, and the others. Arrows of blood spurted out. Inside the black tortoise realm, in the devil's land, Qin Feiyang floated above a sea of blood, and his body was full of murderous intent. This was the blood that had accumulated in the Tianluo Sea yesterday. The thick smell of blood shrouded the world. At this moment, all the beasts in the devil's land were lying on the ground, trembling. Hearing the white-eyed wolf's voice, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the white-eyed wolf, the devil ancestor, and a group of people immediately appeared beside him. This murderous intent. Zhang Xiaoyang's face changed again, and he looked at Qin Feiyang in horror. Dong Zhenyang, the devil ancestor, and the demonic dragon. Although he had seen them in the great Qin Empire and other continents before, this was the first time he had seen the process of opening the slaughter zone. He was quite shocked in his heart. He actually needed to absorb so much blood. Qin Feiyang said, "Stay away from me." The group of people heard this and immediately retreated. But there was one person who did not look at Qin Feiyang from beginning to end. This person was Fire Lotus. She lowered her head, and her eyes were full of worry and a trace of struggle. She was naturally worried about Hua Yi. Hua Yi was fighting alone outside, and his opponents were the 4 great dragon ancestors. He was definitely in danger. Suddenly, she gritted her teeth, looked up at Qin Feiyang, and said, "Qin Dage, let me go out and help Hua Yi." "You?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. "I can do it," Fire Lotus said with a firm gaze. "You stay here and don't distract me. The slaughter zone will be completed soon." Qin Feiyang rejected Fire Lotus's request without hesitation. What a joke! For great dragon ancestors, for heaven-defying divine artifacts, going out to die? Outside, the burly man and the other 2 wielded the heaven-defying divine artifacts and crazily bombarded the ancient castle. The destructive aura was earth-shattering. The 2 burly men guarding the entrance had already retreated to the Sky Dragon Sea, because the aura of the heaven-defying divine artifacts was too terrifying. With their cultivation base, they couldn't withstand it at all. As for princess dragons, that milky white divine power reappeared, covering her entire body, protecting her from any harm. The black-robed old man stood high in the sky, scanning the sea below. The sea was surging, but this wasn't caused by Hua Yi, but by the power of the heaven-defying divine artifacts. Seeing that Hua Yi didn't appear, the black-robed old man couldn't help but frown. Although the previous palm had injured Hua Yi, it was impossible for him to die like this. After all, he was a half-step on dying. Was he hiding? But it made sense. Facing the 4 great dragon ancestors, only a fool would run out and risk his life. But if he wanted to hide, he had to get his permission. His divine consciousness surged out and flooded into the sea below. As expected, Hua Yi was squatting at the bottom of the sea, looking at the sea above as if it had nothing to do with him. So many dragon ancestors, so many heaven-defying divine artifacts. How could he withstand it? Only by hiding could he be on the right path. As for the ancient castle, it was up to the heavens. It wasn't his anyway, so he wouldn't feel bad if it was broken. But suddenly, sensing the black-robed old man's divine will, Hua Yi's expression immediately changed, and he hurriedly turned into a stream of light, activating escape mode. Why don't you go find Qin Feiyang? Why do you keep looking for me? I'm not familiar with you. Don't be like a mad dog, okay? He was already anxious in his heart. He was also full of resentment towards Qin Feiyang. It wasn't impossible to leave him outside, but he had to at least give him a useful divine artifact. Of course, it was undeniable that the Azure Phoenix sword was still good, a legendary divine artifact. But the problem now was that the other party was not an ordinary small fry, but a dragon ancestor, a heaven-defying divine artifact. Facing a heaven-defying divine artifact, what use could the Azure Phoenix sword be? It was not enough to fill the gap between the other party's teeth. Swish! After a few breaths, the black-robed old man chased into the sea and blocked in front of Hui. Big brother, I have no enmity with you. Can't you let me go? Hui said with a bitter face. A few days ago in the northern region, you played me like a monkey, and you still dare to say that you have no enmity with me? If you hadn't helped Qin Feiyang, I would have killed him long ago. So in my eyes, you deserve to die more than Qin Feiyang. The black-robed old man waved his hand, and the power of the divine dragon roared out, overflowing with murderous intent. If I don't show my power, you think I'm a sick cat? Hui said angrily. He was so aggressive that he really thought he would fight with his life on the line. The black-robed old man couldn't help but admire his courage. But immediately after, then a shocking scene appeared. Hui suddenly turned around and fled in panic like a rabbit. The black-robed old man was stunned, and the corner of his mouth twitched fiercely. This was too funny. Sure enough, he was just a lowly rat. With a wave of his hand, divine power surged out and immediately drowned Hui. Hui's scream suddenly sounded. Die! The black-robed old man's eyes turned cold. He took a step forward and punched Hui's head. Just you wait. I'll skin you old things sooner or later. Hui roared in panic, and a bloody light suddenly rose from his body. His whole person instantly disappeared from the black-robed old man's sight, as if he had evaporated from the world. The black-robed old man's eyes widened, and he looked around in surprise, full of disbelief. How did he disappear? Above the sea, the burly man and the other two were still bombarding the ancient world, and the clanging sounds were endless, resounding through the night sky. And every collision would produce dazzling sparks like fireworks exploding. Whoosh! The black-robed old man returned to the side of Princess Dragons, and the surprise on his face hadn't disappeared. What's wrong? Princess Dragons raised her eyebrows. The black-robed old man said he disappeared. What? He's a half-step Undying Realm expert, and you actually let him escape. Princess Dragons said angrily. He escaped. The burly man and the other two heard this and stopped, looking at the black-robed old man in surprise. Your Highness, please forgive us. Seeing Princess Dragons angry, the black-robed old man hurriedly half-knelt in the void, his old face full of panic. What are you looking at? If you don't blow up that spatial divine object for me, I'll make you all die here. Princess Dragons looked at the burly man and the other two and shouted. Chapter 23:20. Hearing this, the burly man and the other two hurriedly attacked the castle again. Princess Dragons looked at the black-robed old man and said, How did he escape? I don't know. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. The black-robed old man shook his head, his eyes full of confusion. I really didn't expect this person to have such a life-saving method. A cold light flashed in Princess Dragon's eyes. Kacha! A loud, shattering sound was heard all of a sudden. Princess Dragons and the black-robed old man's eyes lit up and immediately looked at the castle. The black-robed old man couldn't see it, because he didn't have this ability. But Princess Dragons could clearly see that a crack the width of a finger had appeared on the castle. You also quickly go and help. Immediately, she was shocked and shouted at the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man nodded. Accompanied by a loud clanging sound, a black iron fan appeared, like the feathers of a crow woven out, emitting a gloomy and cold aura. This was his heaven-defying artifact. For great ancestral dragons, for heaven-defying artifacts, constantly bombarded the castle. Clang! Kacha! The cracks on the castle were getting bigger and bigger, and there were more and more. At first, there was only one, but slowly the second, third, and fourth cracks continued to appear. The cold light on Princess Dragon's face became more and more intense. The existence of a heaven-defying artifact had actually surpassed the category of artifact. Even if it was also a heaven-defying artifact, it would be difficult to destroy the other party. But this kind of situation was usually one-on-one. In other words, in a one-on-one situation, the two heaven-defying artifacts were basically equal, and no one could do anything to the other. But now it was 1 against 4. So, as long as she was given enough time, Princess Dragons had the confidence to completely crush the castle. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also heard the sound of the castle breaking, and his heart sank. Ever since Uncle Yuan gave the castle to him, so many years had passed, and this was the first time the castle had been damaged. This made his heart ache. Although the castle was only an artifact, in his eyes, it had long become an inseparable family. Every time that shattering sound entered his mind, his heart would ache along with it. Clang! At this moment, the blood sword in Qin Feiyang's hand suddenly trembled, releasing a world-destroying aura. Under this presence, whether it was Demon Alpha, Demon Dragon, Dong Jingyang, or Zhang Xiang, they all felt a sense of fear and despair. This is the slaughter domain? Terrifying, truly terrifying. Zhang Xiaoyang muttered. This was the first time he had seen the slaughter zone, and it had left a shadow in his heart that he could not get rid of for the rest of his life. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang waved his hand and led everyone out of the black tortoise world. There was still half of the blood in the blood sea below, enough for him to activate the slaughter domain again. As for the demon ancestor and the others, he did not trust them. Hence, he did not feel at ease letting them continue to stay in the black tortoise realm. As soon as he appeared in the ancient castle, the sound of the collision resounded like thunder in his ears. He looked at the 4 walls of the hall. Under the constant attacks of the 4 heaven-defying weapons, countless cracks appeared. It looked like a layer of spider webs. If this continued, the castle would definitely shatter. Thank you. Leave the rest to me, Qin Feiyang murmured. Fire Lotus said in surprise. I didn't hear Huiyi's voice. Could something have happened to him? Don't worry. This guy is more slippery than a loach. He will definitely be fine. Qin Feiyang comforted her, then took the blood sword and the slaughter domain and instantly appeared outside. Seeing this, the eyes of the black-robed old man and the other 3 surged with cold light. They immediately raised their heaven-defying weapons and attacked Qin Feiyang. Destroy for me, Qin Feiyang roared. The blood sword was like a graceful swan, tearing through the sky. Accompanied by a few loud clangs, the heaven-defying weapons in the hands of the 4 were immediately cut in half. What? The dragon princess was dumbfounded. She had heard of the slaughter domain, but she did not expect it to be so terrifying. A heaven-defying weapon was like cutting vegetables. Was she dreaming? The black-robed old man and the other 3 were also aghast. They hurriedly took the heaven-defying weapons and retreated. Qin Feiyang did not chase after them. He glanced at the sea, then suddenly looked at Princess Dragons and said, Where's Huiyi? He's dead. Princess Dragons sneered. Dead. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Immediately after, a terrifying cold light burst out from his eyes. Then you'll be buried with him. As his voice fell, Qin Feiyong raised the blood sword in his hand and slashed at Princess Dragons. Princess, quickly retreat. The black-robed old man and the other three were shocked and quickly stood in front of Princess Dragons. Ants dare to block the way. Qin Feiyong roared, and the blood sword mercilessly slashed. The four screamed, and blood splashed into the sky. There were several deep wounds on their bodies. Too terrifying! Looking at this scene, Princess Dragons couldn't help but be moved. A sword that seriously injured 4 great ancestral dragons, and a sword that cut off 4 heaven-defying weapons. This power can be said to be shocking. I never thought of provoking your dragons, but I'm not afraid of trouble. Qin Feiyong looked at Princess Dragons, his expression incomparably cold. His big hand firmly grasped the blood sword and slashed out angrily. Sword Qi shattered the void. Blood light dyed the sky. This sword contained all the anger and killing intent in Qin Feiyong's heart. Your Highness, the black-robed old man and the other 3 exclaimed. Suddenly, the milky white divine power emerged again, forming a large barrier to protect Princess Dragons. Boom! The blood sword carried a sharp edge that could destroy the world as it slashed on the barrier. As a result, the blood sword that had always been successful was actually blocked by the barrier. The black-robed old man and the other 3 immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Immediately after, the 4 looked at each other and retreated at the same time, standing in the north, south, east, and west directions. Clang! As the divine power surged, the 4 heaven-defying weapons that were cut off immediately emitted a magnificent aura. And Qin Feiyong was shocked and turned his head to look at the 4 people. Not good. It's the power of law. You know what? You're stupid. If you can completely destroy those 4 heaven-defying weapons in the first place, then now they won't be able to activate the power of law. But you came to kill me. The point is, you can't kill me. Princess Dragons revealed a mocking look. Yes, I admit I was a little careless, but so what? As long as you fall into my hands, even if Long Zun personally descends, he will have to hold back. Qin Feiyong said. Princess Dragons said contemptuously, I don't deny it, but do you have the ability? Do you really think this divine power can protect you? Break for me. Qin Feiyong roared hysterically. The blue veins and blood vessels on his forehead and hands burst out, making him look exceptionally ferocious. The blood-colored long sword in his hand was constantly trembling, exuding a sharp aura that could destroy the world. Break! Qin Feiyong roared. Finally, the milky white barrier, accompanied by a crisp cracking sound, cracked open a crack. Princess Dragons's beautiful face immediately turned pale. No one can stop my will and belief. Qin Feiyong roared again. He grabbed the blood sword with his other hand and suddenly pressed it down. Kacha! The barrier finally shattered completely and collapsed. This? Princess Dragons's face was filled with disbelief. Damn it! Quick! The black-robed old man and the other 3 were also burning with anxiety. The power of the 4 laws rushed towards Qin Feiyong murderously. The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth lifted, and the blood-colored long sword clanged against Princess Dragon's neck. He turned his head to look at the 4 people and sneered. Do you want to try and see if you're faster than me? Hearing this, the 4 people's faces changed, and they hurriedly dispersed the power of the law. Qin Feiyong retracted his gaze and looked at Princess Dragon, saying, Rivers and mountains rotate. You didn't expect that it would fall into my hands so quickly. Then why don't you try and kill me? Princess Dragons was not afraid at all. Instead, she was full of provocation. Slap! Qin Feiyong raised his other hand and directly slapped Princess Dragon's face. You dare to hit me? Princess Dragons said angrily. Qin Feiyong said, You just slapped me. I have to return it to you. Princess Dragons touched her cheek and said gloomily, "Do you know that from the time I was born until now, no one has dared to hit me?" "That's good. I'll let you experience the feeling of being bullied. At the same time, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your mother." As Qin Feiyong spoke, another slap landed on the dragon race's princess's face without warning. "You bastard! Are you still a man? Why are you so calculative?" Princess Dragons shouted angrily, "When you dealt with me, I didn't see you show any mercy." Qin Feiyong sneered and suddenly raised his arm. Seeing this, Princess Dragon's tears flowed out, as if she had suffered a great grievance. Ah, Qin Feiyong was stunned. Isn't this too fragile? But thinking about it, it makes sense. As the daughter of Long Zun, she has always been high and mighty. It's normal that she can't bear to be wronged. But this doesn't make people sympathize with her. He didn't have that much sympathy. Qin Feiyong grabbed Princess Dragon's neck and looked at the four people in black robes, saying, "Put down the heaven-defying artifact in your hands." "Qin Feiyong, you better not mess around, otherwise, even if the Heavenly Emperor comes down, he won't be able to save you." The four of them warned. "Do you need me to say it again?" Qin Feiyong shouted. The big hand that was grabbing Princess Dragon's neck exerted a little force, and Princess Dragon's face immediately flushed red. The sound of something breaking could be heard from his neck. Don't. The four of them quickly let go of the heaven-defying artifact. Qin Feiyong waved his blood-red sword, and waves of sword qi swept out like lightning, cutting the four heaven-defying artifact into pieces on the spot. This way, it was impossible to activate the power of the ancient code. Haha, it was also at this moment, accompanied by a wild laughter. He rushed out from the sea below in a sorry state. Qin Feiyong was slightly taken aback. He turned to look at Hui and said, "You're not dead." "I'm joking. Will I die?" Hui said. Then Qin Feiyong looked at Princess Dragons. Hui pursed his lips and said, "You still don't understand? She's lying to you." Qin Feiyong nodded in realization. Hui laughed. "Are you sad to hear that I'm dead?" "No." Qin Feiyong shook his head. Chapter 23-21. Still stubborn. I saw it when I was hiding down there. Hui smiled. The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth twitched, and he coldly snorted. "You're really something." "You're still complaining? Leaving me alone outside. I haven't settled the score with you yet. If it weren't for my life-saving means, I would have died long ago." Hui said in dissatisfaction. Qin Feiyong smiled. "I'll settle the score with you later." Hui stared at Qin Feiyong, looked up at Princess Dragons, and said with a smile, "Little beauty, what did I say in the western desert yesterday? Do you still remember?" Princess Dragons's face was as cold as frost. "Didn't I say that the next time we meet, it might not be us who will fall into your hands, and it might be you who will fall into our hands? Didn't it come true now?" Hui grinned. "What are you so proud of?" Princess Dragons said angrily. "I'm proud of it. What about it? Also, don't look at me like that. I'm a thin-skinned person, and I will be shy." Hui said. "Shameless." Princess Dragons angrily rebuked. "You don't understand, do you? Being shameless is my strength. Also, what I like the most is to take advantage of people and hit them when they are down." After Hui finished speaking, he turned around and angrily ran in front of the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man's eyes were cold. Hui pointed at the black-robed old man's nose and shouted, "Don't move! Your princess is in our hands!" The black-robed old man looked at Princess Dragons, and the anger and killing intent in his heart were suppressed. "Your grandmother, you dared to chase me. See how I will kill you." When he thought of the scene of being chased by the black-robed old man not long ago, His heart couldn't help but burn with anger. I'll let you chase. Chase? Chase again if you have the ability. Who do you think you are? What? He shouted angrily while raising his big hand and constantly slapping the black-robed old man's face. One by one, the loud slaps were endless. In less than 10 breaths, the black-robed old man's face was swollen like a pig's head, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He was in a sorry state. This was also the first time he had been humiliated in such a manner. As the ancestral dragon of the Black Dragon clan, he was an existence that stood above tens of thousands of people. When had he ever encountered such an encounter? His hands were tightly clenched together. His eyes were filled with a bone-piercing sharpness, as if he wanted nothing more than to cut Hua-i into 1,000 pieces and grind his bones to dust. Still glaring? What are you staring at? Never seen a handsome guy before? Hua-i became more and more spirited, not showing any mercy in his attacks. Gradually, the black-robed old man's face was lacerated and his flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Qin Feiyong said, "That's enough. Kill them quickly." "All right." Hua-i chuckled, killing intent surging in his eyes. "I've let you guys mess around for so long. It's time for this farce to end." But at this moment, a cold voice sounded. This voice, Qin Feiyong and Hua-i were startled. They quickly looked up into the sky and saw a woman with a hazy face standing high in the sky. "Greetings, Lord Dragon Sovereign." The black-robed old man and the other 3 immediately knelt down in the air with reverence. "I'll go." Whoop! Yi came back to his senses and immediately ran to Qin Feiyong's side anxiously. With a face full of regret, he muttered, "If I had known earlier, I would have continued to hide." "Do you think that by hiding you can escape her eyes and ears?" Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him. As the ruler of the divine land, as the strongest person in the ancient world, even if she hid in a crack in the ground, she would still be able to find her. "Then what should we do now?" Hui asked. Qin Feiyong said in a deep voice, "What else can we do other than fight with her? Even if you want to fight with your lives on the line, it will depend on whether you have the ability to do so." Princess Dragon sneered. Qin Feiyong glanced at her, then looked up at Dragon Sovereign. He still couldn't see her face clearly. It was filled with a sense of mystery. He asked, "When did you come?" Dragon Sovereign said faintly, "When you stepped into the divine land, this sovereign came." Qin Feiyong was shocked and asked suspiciously, "Then why didn't you make a move?" "This sovereign wanted to see how capable you are, but the result has disappointed this sovereign. Your strongest means is only that slaughter domain." Dragon Sovereign shook his head. At the same time, a terrifying aura filled the air. Qin Feiyong shouted, "Don't forget, your daughter is still in my hands." Dragon Sovereign turned a deaf ear and looked at Princess Dragons. His tone was still very calm as he said, "Do you know your mistake?" Princess Dragons avoided his gaze. "I have repeatedly told you to cultivate well and not to care about these trivial matters. But not only did you not listen, you even sneaked to the northern region. Tell me, if something happens to you, how am I going to explain it to your father?" Dragon Sovereign shouted, with a trace of anger in his tone. "I'm sorry," Princess Dragons murmured, her face full of apology. "Father?" Qin Feiyong and Hua-i looked at each other. That's right. Since Princess Dragons was Dragon Sovereign's daughter, then Dragon Sovereign must have a husband. Who was Dragon Sovereign's husband? If Dragon Sovereign's strength was so powerful, then wouldn't her husband be even stronger? It seemed that the strength of Princess Dragons was far from as simple as they thought. Dragon Sovereign glared at Princess Dragons, then looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "I'll give you a chance. Take the initiative to let her go." "What if I don't let her go?" Qin Feiyong said. "You don't have the qualifications to negotiate." A mere Slaughter domain. I can crush it with a wave of my hand. Dragon Sovereign took a step forward, and a vast aura rolled out. Qin Feiyang's face changed. He did not dare to hesitate and hurriedly led Hui and Princess Dragons into the castle. He did not dare to doubt these words. The last time in the Heavenly Dragon Sea, Long Zun had crushed the slaughter domain as easily as crushing dry weeds. What to do? What to do? As soon as he entered the castle, Hui roared at Qin Feiyang. You have no way out, because this castle can't stop Mother at all. Taking the initiative to surrender is your only way now. Princess Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang and the others and said. Qin Feiyang glanced at Princess Dragons, then looked at White-Eyed Wolf, Fire Lotus, and the others and said in a deep voice, Hui, watch her for me. What are you going to do? Hui was surprised. Fight to the death. A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes, and he disappeared in an instant. Black Tortoise Realm. Devil's Land. Qin Feiyang glanced at the blood sea below, and a terrifying suction force suddenly emerged from his body. The blood in the blood sea suddenly rose into the air, frantically rushing into the slaughter domain, and was absorbed by the blood sword. Boom! The power of the blood sword began to soar again. Originally, he wanted to save the remaining blood for the next time he opened the slaughter domain, but the appearance of Dragon Sovereign made him change this idea, because it was impossible to defeat Dragon Sovereign with the current slaughter domain. Lord Dragon Sovereign, it's all because of our carelessness that Her Highness fell into their hands. We are willing to accept the punishment. Outside, the black-robed old man and the other three knelt in the void, looking at Dragon Sovereign. You really deserve to be punished. For great ancestral dragons, for heaven-defying artifacts, and still can't do anything to two brats. Dragon Sovereign shouted. The four lowered their heads, ashamed to show their faces. Dragon Sovereign waved her hand, and the four broken heaven-defying artifacts immediately turned into streams of light and flew in front of her. Following closely, a milky white power emerged. Clang! The four artifacts immediately began to repair, and in a moment they were restored to their original state. Dragon Sovereign looked at the four heaven-defying artifacts and said with a commanding tone, Unlock the seal for this sovereign! What? Unlock the seal! Lord Dragon Sovereign, you must not. We are now in Divine Prefecture, not the four major domains. If they unlock the seal, half of Divine Prefecture will be affected. At that time, it will be a scene of misery and suffering. You know the power of the heaven-defying artifacts better than us. Lord, please reconsider. The black-robed old man and the other three's faces changed and hurriedly said. Dragon Sovereign raised her eyebrows. The burly man said carefully, Why don't you activate the power of law, and we will directly enter the castle? This castle is Qin Feiyang's only support. This sovereign wants to destroy it for him. Dragon Sovereign said. The burly man said, As long as we kill him, won't the castle belong to us dragons? Makes sense. Instead of destroying it, it is better for us dragons to use it. This way, the strength of us dragons can increase by another level. The black-robed old man, the blonde young man, and the silver-haired young man all nodded in agreement. Dragon Sovereign looked at the four, and with a wave of her hand, the four heaven-defying artifacts immediately flew to the four. The four hurriedly kept them for us dragons to use. The dragons murmured, raised their arms, and a mysterious force emerged from their fingertips. Then they drew in the void. Immediately a crack appeared in the void. At the same time, inside the castle, a crack also appeared in the void above the hull. Could this be? Hui and the others looked at the crack. That's right. This is the power of the law of space and time. I know this kind of power of law very well, because my heaven-defying artifact has mastered the power of the law of space and time. The demon ancestor said in a deep voice. She actually also mastered the power of law. What should we do now? The group of people panicked. Little Chinzi, quickly! The white-eyed wolf roared. The princess of the dragons sneered. It's useless. You all have to die today. I'll kill you first. Huai was furious. Divine power surged and cut off one of the princess of the dragon's arms on the spot. Blood spurted out like an arrow. The intense pain caused the princess of the dragon's face to distort. At the same time, 5 figures walked out of the crack and landed in the sky above the hall. It was Dragon Sovereign, the black-robed old man, and the other 3. What? You guys really dare to hurt Her Highness? You're simply courting death. When they saw the situation of the princess of the dragons, the black-robed old man and the other 3 suddenly changed their expressions. A monstrous murderous aura also emerged from Dragon Sovereign's body, filling every corner of the castle. Huai and the others suddenly felt as if they had fallen into a sea of murderous aura, and their bodies turned cold. Huai stared at Dragon Sovereign, his eyes flashing with madness, and said gloomily, "If you dare to take a step, I'll really kill her." After he finished speaking, he raised his hand and cut off the other arm of the princess of the dragons. Mother. The princess of the dragons' face was pale. Now she was really afraid. This group of people was completely different from the people she had met before. Those people she had met before, facing the dragons, did not dare to resist at all. But this group of people, the more they were forced, the crazier they became. They could do anything. Chapter 23-22. And Huai's action had undoubtedly angered Longzun. In front of this sovereign, even if she's in your hands, you can't kill her. Before his voice faded, a terrifying aura burst out and instantly covered the entire ancient castle. Whether it was Huai and Fire Lotus or White-Eyed Wolf and Demon Ancestor, they were all imprisoned on the ground, unable to move. I'm not willing. Huai roared in his heart, desperately struggling, but to no avail. Under that majesty, he couldn't even move a finger. Princess Dragons was clearly in front of him, but he could only watch helplessly. This feeling of powerlessness made him extremely depressed. Longzun took a step forward and landed in front of Princess Dragons. Then, with a wave of his hand, an invisible force emerged and blasted Huai away. Bang! Huai was like a meteorite as he slammed into the wall behind him, blood spurting out of his mouth. Immediately after, Longzun waved his hand again, and a milky white light poured into Princess Dragon's wound. The broken arm immediately recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Dragon Princess's pale face finally regained a bit of color. Longzun glanced at Huai lying on the ground, then looked at Princess Dragons and said, "Now you know what a vicious creature humans are." Princess Dragons nodded. Humans shouldn't exist in this world at all, and can't be compared to us noble divine dragons. If it weren't for your father, this sovereign would have already wiped them out. Longzun said coldly, with deep disgust in his words. During the conversation, Princess Dragon's hands seemed to have been reborn. This healing ability could be said to be abnormal. Even the divine life pill couldn't be so fast. Longzun looked at Princess Dragons and said, "Do you know what to do now?" "I know." Princess Dragons nodded, with a trace of hatred in her eyes. She turned around and walked towards Huai step by step. "Humans are vicious? Old witch, can you be more shameless? If it weren't for you dragons forcing us, would we humans have come to this point today?" Huai roared. Although his body was imprisoned, he could still transmit his voice. "Force? We dragons are nobler than you humans. Isn't it natural for humans to be ruled by us dragons?" Longzun said, "Noble? I really don't know where you find your sense of superiority. Since we humans are so lowly, why did you all transform into our human form? I think you dragons are simply jealous of us humans. He sneered. At this point, you still dare to look down on us dragons? You're really not afraid of death. Princess Dragons stepped forward and kicked Yi's body. What is there to fear about death? I only hate that I don't have the chance to personally deal with you bastards and send you to hell. But don't worry, the dragons will perish sooner or later. Not a single one will be left. He laughed. You deserve to die. Princess Dragon's eyes flashed with a cold light, and a white dagger appeared. It was a legendary artifact. Even if you kill me, you won't be able to stop the destruction of the dragons, because there are tens of thousands of humans who will be like me. Sooner or later, you will pay the price for the sins you've committed in the past. He laughed wildly. If you're not afraid of death, then come. Princess Dragon sneered, raised the dagger in her hand, and stabbed towards Yi's head. Boom! But at this moment, a terrifying, murderous aura suddenly appeared in the castle. Following closely, a blood-colored sword light emerged out of thin air and charged towards Princess Dragons. In an instant, Princess Dragons couldn't help but tremble and fall into despair. She felt as if a death god had arrived. And Long Zun was also shocked. He quickly stood in front of Princess Dragons and slapped the blood-colored sword light with his palm. Boom! The two collided. The blood-colored sword light was annihilated on the spot. But Long Zun's hand was also dripping with blood. Lord Long Zun was actually injured. The black-robed old man and the other three stared angrily. They couldn't believe it. Princess Dragons was also shocked. Looking at Long Zun again, he lowered his head and looked at his palm. On his palm, there was a finger-long wound that was bleeding nonstop. Obviously, this was caused by the blood-colored sword light from before. Noble dragons, are you guys joking? Accompanied by a sarcastic voice, a blood-colored youth appeared in front of Yi. That's right, he was Qin Feiyang. But at this moment, whether it was his eyes, hair, or skin, they were all blood red. His entire body was emitting an unprecedented murderous aura. At first glance, it was as if a demon had been born. Merely his gaze was enough to make one feel fear and despair, especially the blood sword in his hand, which was surrounded by blood-red flames, as if it had just slaughtered hundreds of millions of creatures. Its murderous aura and sharpness were incomparable. This, looking at the blood-colored sword, the black-robed old man, and the other three, had a look of disbelief. They could clearly feel that the power of this blood sword was on a completely different level from before. Even just the sharpness of the blood sword made them feel a great crisis. This kind of crisis, even when facing Qin Batian, had never appeared. I don't know if the dragons are noble or not, but I know that the taste of dragon meat is really good, especially when roasted. It's simply a delicacy. Qin Feiyang suddenly grinned and looked at Long Zun. You're courting death. Long Zun said word by word. His tone was bone-chilling. I really do want to die. Unfortunately, even the heavens can't take my life. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, his eyes burst out with a dazzling blood-red light, and the blood-colored sword in his hand shook. A terrifying aura suddenly surged out. The pressure that was imprisoning Yi and the others immediately collapsed. What? Long Zun was also shocked. It could actually defeat her pressure? Could it be that the power of this blood-colored sword was already comparable to hers? Little Qin Dage, White-Eyed Wolf, Fire Lotus, and the demon ancestor immediately ran behind Qin Feiyang after regaining their freedom. Don't worry, I'm here, Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Hearing this, everyone's heart immediately calmed down. But to be honest, the current Qin Feiyang even made them afraid. That terrifying, murderous aura was like that of an Azura. You risked your life twice to buy time for me. It's really hard on you. Leave the rest to me. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the embarrassed Hua Yi and said with a smile, "The key is that I didn't die twice. It seems that the heavens aren't willing to take away my rotten life." Hua Yi climbed up and grinned. Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand. Longzuin, princess dragons, and the black-robed old man immediately disappeared. While they were not paying attention, they were forcefully sent out. Fire Lotus took out the rusty axe and handed it to Qin Feiyang, saying, "Qin Dage, this is for you. It can help you at a critical moment." Qin Feiyang glanced at the axe and kept it in his qi. Since Fire Lotus said so, then this axe might really be useful. Because he didn't know Fire Lotus's true identity, he thought that this axe was just a little strange. But it was different now. Fire Lotus was the palace master of Nine Heavens Palace. Her divine weapon was definitely not ordinary. Shua. Without saying anything, Qin Feiyang disappeared from the ancient castle with a flicker. Outside, the calm sea became turbulent because of the previous battle. Huge waves covered the sky, wave after wave. Longzuin, princess dragons, and the 4 ancestor dragons stood in the sky above the sea. Their faces were still filled with shock. The blonde youth suddenly looked at Longzuin and asked, "Lord Longzuin, you're experienced and knowledgeable. Do you know what kind of divine technique this slaughter domain is?" "I don't know. Never heard of it." Longzuin shook his head. The 4 ancestor dragons looked at each other in disbelief. Even someone like Longzuin had never heard of it. The black-robed elder said in a deep voice, "Lord Longzuin, there's something I don't know if I should say." Longzuin said impatiently, "Just say what you want to say." The black-robed elder said, "This kid is a bigger threat than Qin Batian." The burly man and the other 2 were shocked when they heard this. They turned to look at the black-robed elder. "Think about it carefully. You've fought Qin Batian so many times. When didn't he run away? Qin Batian's talent is indeed terrifying, but Qin Batian's means are far inferior to Qin Feiyang's. Look at Qin Feiyang now. He's only an early-stage divine lord, but he's already able to fight with us. Plus, if we don't unlock the seal of the divine weapon, we won't be his match. You can imagine, when he breaks through to the imperishable realm, how strong will he be?" The black-robed elder said in a serious tone. Hearing this, the burly man and the other 2 nodded. "That's true. Looks like we have to get rid of this kid no matter what," Longzuin whispered. In the blink of an eye, just as Longzuin finished speaking, Qin Feiyang came out of the castle and said coldly, "That's what I'm thinking. Today, I'll get rid of you here." Clang! Then, Qin Feiyang gripped his blood sword, his blood hair fluttering in the wind. His killing intent overflowed to the heavens as he slashed his sword at Longzuin. "Back!" Longzuin shouted. A milky white divine power appeared in her palm and covered her hand like a glove. Then, she looked at Qin Feiyang. Killing intent flashed in her eyes, and she slapped at the blood sword. The black-robed elder and the other 3 took princess dragons and retreated like lightning. Boom! The tip of the blood sword stabbed at Longzuin's palm. The blood sword was blocked. The tip of the sword couldn't pierce through the divine power. This, Qin Feiyang was stunned. What was going on? Didn't he just hurt Longzuin? Wait. Longzuin didn't seem to use any divine power, but this was too terrifying. He just released his divine power, and the blood sword couldn't do anything? What a pity. Although it's very strong, it's not to the extent that it can threaten my life. The outcome is already decided. Today you're going to die, not me. Longzuin said coldly. His arm suddenly shook. A terrifying force suddenly rushed toward Qin Feiyang. Puff! Qin Feiyang spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying on the spot. The blood-colored sword was fine, but his arm was bleeding profusely from the lacerations. You really hid your bloodline power. However, your bloodline power is no longer important. Longzuin looked at the blood at the corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth and took a step forward. That terrifying speed was not something Qin Feiyang could compare with. Before Qin Feiyang could react, Longzuin appeared behind him. Divine power gushed out of his palm, and he slapped at Qin Feiyang's back. Chapter 23:23. Longzuin's palm was merciless. As the black-robed old man said, Qin Feiyang's threat to the dragons had surpassed Qin Baishan's. So once there was a chance, he had to kill him in one blow to prevent any undue delay. This was a sure-death situation. Even if Qin Feiyang opened the slaughter domain, even if Qin Feiyang had the battle, attainment, and returned secret arts, he still couldn't block Longzuin's palm, because the difference in cultivation between the two was too great. No matter how heaven-defying the 6-word secret arts were, it couldn't make up for this gap. How great would it be if our dragon race was able to obtain this slaughter domain? The blonde youth whispered, full of desire. The silver-haired youth and the burly man also nodded, their eyes full of greed. Once such a heaven-defying method fell into the hands of the dragons, who would have the guts to resist the dragons in the future, then do you think he will give it to us? Obviously not. So killing him in the cradle is the best choice. The black-robed old man smiled coldly. The burly man and the other two nodded. There is a way to live, but you don't want to take it. Serves you right. The princess of the dragons looked at Qin Feiyang with a cold smile on her face. She had always been curious about Qin Feiyang. What kind of person was this that even the ancestral dragon was so afraid of? She was helpless. So when she was in Dongling, she approached Qin Feiyang to get to know him better. But she didn't expect. It didn't take long for Qin Feiyang to see through her identity. However, even if he saw through her identity, she didn't want to kill Qin Feiyang. Of course, sooner or later, she still had to kill him. After all, Qin Feiyang's existence was a threat to the dragons. As the princess of the dragons and the daughter of Longzuin, she naturally had to think for the dragons. Although the ending was death, if they were willing to listen to her, they could at least live a little longer. Unfortunately, these people were too insensible. Not only did they lie to her repeatedly, they even used her to threaten Longzuin. She had even cut off 2 of her arms. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? In short, there was no sympathy in her heart. This kind of person deserved to die. In the blink of an eye, at this moment, whether it was the 4 ancestor dragons or the dragon princess, all of them believed that Qin Feiyang was dead for sure. Even Qin Feiyang himself thought so, because he had no time to react at all. Just as Qin Feiyang was about to die at Longzuin's hands, a resounding sound suddenly rang out from within his body. This sound was like a peerless divine weapon awakening from its slumber. Following closely, pieces of rust flowed out of Qin Feiyang's body like tidewater. Although they were rusty, every single one of them exuded a terrifying aura. What is it? The princess and the 4 ancestral dragons were bewildered. Not to mention them, even Qin Feiyang looked doubtful. He had never seen such a thing before. Clang! Not only did the rust exude a terrifying aura, but it also made a harsh metallic sound. As soon as it appeared, it quickly gathered behind Qin Feiyang and condensed into a shield. Boom! Longzuin slapped with his palm, and the shield immediately disintegrated and turned back into a piece of rust. Although it failed to block Longzuin, it gave Qin Feiyang time to react. Swish! Qin Feiyang took the opportunity to take a step forward and instantly appeared hundreds of miles away. The dense mass of rust followed him from beginning to end. Longzuin raised his eyebrows, glancing at the rust floating around Qin Feiyang's body, and a hint of anger flashed in his eyes. What the hell is this? Qin Feiyang was also confused. Wait, suddenly, his eyes trembled. Could it be the rust on the axe? He hurriedly looked inside his qi si and immediately saw that the axe floating in his qi si had changed greatly at this time. The entire axe was colorful, as if it was made of colorful stones. There wasn't even a piece of rust on it. Is this the true face of the axe? Qin Feiyang murmured. And now it was obvious. The rust floating around him was the rust on the axe. Just the rust on the axe actually possessed such terrifying power? Although it didn't block Longzuin, one had to know that Longzuin was the strongest person in the ancient world. The fact that it could go against her was enough to show that the axe was extraordinary. No matter what it is, it can't help you. Longzuin came back to his senses and raised his hand. A bright divine power gushed out from his fingertips, carrying a destructive aura, and attacked Qin Feiyang. Humph! Qin Feiyang held the blood sword with both hands and slashed. Sword chi surged and covered the sky. Boom! The instant the two collided, the divine power came crashing down with an unstoppable momentum. The sword chi kept shattering. In the end, that divine power rushed in front of Qin Feiyang aggressively, seeing that Qin Feiyang was about to be drowned. Clang! At this time, the rust changed again. All of a sudden, the originally dim and lusterless rust began to glow with multicolored divine light. A mighty aura rolled out and spread between heaven and earth. At this time, the pieces of rust were like colorful butterflies, extremely beautiful. Qin Feiyang's face was dull. Was this thing in front of him the rust he was familiar with? Whoosh! Just as he was in a daze, all the rust flew in front of him and condensed into a colorful shield again. Boom! The divine power blasted the shield. The shield collapsed again. Qin Feiyang also took the opportunity to turn around and escape. He was extremely shocked. What level of divine weapon was this axe? It's so familiar in the distance. The ancestral dragon of the Black Dragon clan looked at the rust surrounding Qin Feiyang and muttered to himself. Suddenly, his body shook and he shouted, Lord Longzun, that's a heaven-defying divine weapon of Ninth Heaven Palace. What? Longzun was shocked. Qin Feiyang's body also trembled slightly. This axe was actually a heaven-defying divine weapon, and it was a heaven-defying divine weapon of Ninth Heaven Palace. Ninth Heaven Palace, Princess Dragons murmured, frowning. Could it be that Ninth Heaven Palace is Qin Feiyang's accomplice? No. The black-robed old man shook his head. What do you mean? Princess Dragons was puzzled. The black-robed old man's eyes flashed and looked at Qin Feiyang. Where did you get this divine weapon? Qin Feiyang said, Land of the undead. Land of the undead, the black-robed old man whispered, looking at Princess Dragons. Ninth Heaven Palace should have nothing to do with this matter. And the more Princess Dragons listened, the more puzzled she became. Since it was a divine weapon of Ninth Heaven Palace, why didn't it have anything to do with Ninth Heaven Palace? Back then, because of Qin Beishan's matter, I led the dragons to Ninth Heaven Palace to force them to hand him over. But the palace master of Ninth Heaven Palace overestimated himself and wanted to go to war with us dragons. And the battlefield was in the land of the undead. I believe Lord Longzun still remembers that when I went to the northern region, I brought 4 heaven-defying divine weapons. The black-robed old man looked at Longzun and said, When I sent you to the northern region, I considered that both Qin Batian and Ninth Heaven Palace had heaven-defying divine weapons, so I asked you to bring a few more. Longzun nodded. At that time, I didn't think that Ninth Heaven Palace would resist. I even felt that Lord Longzun's consideration was a little unnecessary. But I didn't dare to disobey Lord's order, so I brought 4 divine weapons. When I reached Ninth Heaven Palace, I realized that it was fortunate that Lord had foresight. Otherwise, the one who suffered would have been me. In the end, after a fierce battle, Ninth Heaven Palace was defeated. The palace master of Ninth Heaven Palace died in the land of the undead, and the heaven-defying divine weapon was also destroyed, leaving only fragments. But I didn't expect that after thousands of years, this divine weapon would reappear in the world. And Qin Feiyang found this divine weapon in the land of the undead, so I concluded that it had nothing to do with Ninth Heaven Palace. The black-robed old man said in disbelief. So you didn't destroy the weapon spirit back then? For a divine weapon of this level, as long as the weapon spirit is still there, even if only the last fragment is left, it can be slowly repaired. Long Zun said with a cold tone. The black-robed old man said, but I checked at that time and the weapon spirit was indeed gone. Is there a need to say that? It must have hidden itself and you didn't notice. Long Zun said angrily. The black-robed old man's eyes trembled, and he hurriedly said, I'm sorry, Lord, I was careless. Thinking about it, this was the only possibility. What's the point of saying sorry now? Long Zun snorted and turned to Qin Feiyang, sneering. Even if you have a heaven-defying divine weapon, you won't be able to escape death today. Then we'll wait and see. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. He didn't even look back as he plunged down into the sea below, as long as it didn't implicate Ninth Heaven Palace. Dong! In just an instant, Qin Feiyang entered the sea and disappeared. Humph! Long Zun snorted in disdain, and his divine sense surged into the sea. Shwa! The next moment, her figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 23-24. What should we do? The black-robed old man looked at Princess Dragons and the others. You better pray that nothing unexpected will happen today. Otherwise, with my mother's temper, she will definitely not let you off easily. After Princess Dragons finished speaking, she also rushed into the sea. The black-robed old man's body stiffened. Old Black, you're such a smart person. How could you make such a low-level mistake? Your Highness, I'm not joking with you. If something unexpected happens today because of that artifact, Lord Long Zun will definitely not let you off. The burly man and the other two patted the black-robed old man's shoulder and immediately chased after Princess Dragons. How would I know that an artifact spirit is so cunning? Besides, this is something that happened thousands of years ago. It has nothing to do with now. The black-robed old man was quite depressed at the bottom of the sea. Qin Feiyang was like a sharp arrow, breaking through layers of giant waves as fast as lightning. His gaze constantly swept all around him. He was looking for traces of sea beasts, because now he still needed blood to increase the power of Slaughter Domain. He had far underestimated Long Zun's strength. With just this level, it was impossible to defeat her. However, after the previous battle, the sea beasts in this area had long fled in fear. Now, not even half a ghost shadow could be seen. Shwa! Suddenly, a figure appeared in front. It was Long Zun. You have no way out. Long Zun said coldly. Her divine power roared out, and the sea within tens of millions of miles was suddenly set off huge waves. Qin Feiyang's eyes sank. With such a big movement, the nearby sea beasts would definitely flee further. It seemed that it was no longer realistic to look for sea beasts here. What should I do? Am I really going to die here? Qin Feiyang muttered. It's not over yet. I will buy you some time. You must come back quickly. But at this moment, a loud and clear voice resounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Who is it? Qin Feiyang was surprised. It's me. With a clang, an axe appeared. Can you do it? Qin Feiyang was surprised. In my current state, I definitely can't. But if I release the seal on myself, then there will be no problem at all. A crazy voice came from the axe. Unseal myself, Qin Feiyang murmured. Go. Futu suddenly let out an explosive shout, and an invisible mighty force emerged and blasted towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang suddenly flew out uncontrollably and disappeared in the blink of an eye. You're courting death. Seeing this, Long Zun was enraged. I've long heard of the great name of the dragon's sovereign. Today, allow me to experience it. Seal release. The artifact, spirit growled. Clang. The axe trembled violently. A terrifying divine might immediately roared out. Bastard, you're really going to undo the seal. Long Zun was shocked. Now that things have come to this, what else is there to say? If you don't want the people of the divine land to suffer, then open the barrier and follow me to the galaxy. I will fight you to the death. As soon as he finished speaking, the axe immediately rushed out of the sea and into the sky. Okay, I'll fulfill your wish. Long Zun clenched his fists and rushed out of the sea like lightning, shouting, Black Dragon God, Fire Dragon God, give me the divine artifacts. Whoosh! At that moment, 2 divine artifacts rushed out of the sea and landed in front of Long Zun. They were the burly man's sunset bow and the black-robed old man's iron fan. Princess Long Zun and the 4 ancestral dragons also rushed out of the sea. Looking at the axe rushing into the galaxy, their eyes were full of horror. He actually released the seal. These guys were indeed crazier than the other. Go find Qin Feiyang immediately. You must find him for me. If Qin Feiyang continues to resist, then I'll release the seal on the divine artifacts. After Long Zun finished speaking, he took the 2 heaven-defying divine artifacts and charged towards the axe with murderous intent. At the same time, with a wave of his hand, a light curtain appeared above the clouds and a crack quickly appeared. That was a small part of the barrier of the divine land. This barrier enveloped the entire divine land and naturally cut off the galaxy. In other words, if you want to enter the galaxy, you must first leave this barrier. Whoosh! Axe and Long Zun were like 2 bolts of lightning. They rushed out of the crack, one after another, and rushed into the galaxy without looking back. Release the seal. At the same time, when the 4 ancestral dragons heard Long Zun's words, their eyes trembled slightly. It seemed that Long Zun was really angry. Hundreds of millions of miles away, Qin Feiyang stood above the sea, looking at the 2 figures rushing into the sky, his eyes full of worry. The 2 figures were Long Zun and Axe. You must hold on, Qin Feiyang murmured and then glanced at the sea below. Below this sea, he could clearly sense the aura of the sea beasts. After all, it was hundreds of millions of miles away from the battlefield just now. Clang! Immediately, he raised the blood-colored sword and slashed at the sea. Crash! The sea within a radius of tens of millions of miles suddenly surged up huge waves, covering the sky and the moon. Roar! With a series of screams, the corpses of the sea beasts appeared on the surface of the sea. Blood spurted out and instantly dyed the sea red. Become stronger for me. Become stronger than Long Zun. Qin Feiyang shouted. The blood-colored sword in his hand immediately trembled. In this world, a gust of wind stirred up. A terrifying suction force was unleashed. The blood in the sea below was like a tide, pouring into the killing field and being absorbed by the blood-colored sword. Clang! The blood-colored sword kept trembling, like a bottomless pit that could never be filled. Qin Feiyang's murderous aura and bloodthirsty aura became more and more terrifying. He could feel it from afar. Over there! The black-robed old man glanced at the surrounding sea. When he sensed the murderous aura from afar, he immediately shouted. The burly man looked in the direction of Qin Feiyang and said in a deep voice, Your Highness, you can't continue to stay here. Quickly return to the clan. That's right. The current situation has developed to the point where it's out of control. If you stay here and something happens, we won't be able to explain it to Lord Long Zun. The black-robed old man, the golden-haired young man, and the silver-haired young man all spoke. The princess of the dragons raised her eyebrows and nodded. "All right, I'll return to the clan. If possible, capture him alive for me." "Yes." The four nodded. The princess of the dragons immediately activated a teleportation altar and quickly disappeared. The burly man looked at the black-robed old man and asked, "Do you really want to capture him alive?" "Capture him alive? What a joke!" The three sneered. The burly man couldn't help but smile. He waved his hand and shouted, "Let's go!" Whoosh! The four ancestral dragons immediately flew towards Qin Feiyang with extreme speed. "They're here?" Qin Feiyang also sensed the aura of the four, looking in their direction. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. Clang! He decisively turned around and used the walk formula. In a few breaths, he appeared tens of millions of miles away and slashed at the sea. Splash! Rumble! Countless sea beasts appeared on the sea surface. The killing field was madly absorbing. The power of the blood-red sword suddenly soared to another level. His blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. His blood-red eyes were like a sea of blood floating in the sea. At this moment, he was a living god of death. In the sea, no matter how powerful the sea beasts were, they all fled in fear. "Qin Feiyang, I thought you were a sensible young man, but I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. Facing us dragons, your struggle is useless." Accompanied by a cold shout, the four ancestral dragons cut through the sky and instantly arrived. Divine power surged, annihilating the sky. A destructive aura shrouded all directions. It's not up to you to decide whether it's useful or not. Qin Feiyang waved the blood-red sword, and a blood-red sword chi immediately attacked the four. Rumble! The divine power of the four instantly dissipated. What? The four's expression changed and hurriedly dodged. The blood-red sword chi was like a destructive force that blasted into the sea behind the four. The sea there immediately dried up. The sea water was evaporated by this sword. Looking at this scene, the four ancestral dragons couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. The power of this blood-red sword was obviously much stronger than before. If it were to hit them, they didn't even dare to think about the consequences. "Long Zun isn't here. What can you few small fries do to me?" Qin Feiyang slashed out again. The four hurriedly dodged. The black-robed old man's eyes flashed with a hint of gloominess and shouted, "Old gold! Old silver!" The golden-haired youth and the silver-haired youth looked at each other. Clang! Accompanied by two loud sounds, a golden battle sword and a silver hammer immediately appeared. "If you don't release the seal, you're nothing in front of me." Qin Feiyang directly charged at the two. The golden-haired youth let out a long breath and said indifferently, "Then release the seal." "What?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. "This is Long Zun's order. If you continue to resist, release the seal." After the golden-haired youth finished speaking, he looked at the golden battle sword in front of him and shouted, "Release the seal." Clang! The golden battle sword suddenly trembled. A terrifying aura emanated from it. "I really want to release the seal," Qin Feiyang muttered. "To kill him without hesitation. How much did these dragons hate him?" Boom! All of a sudden, the golden battle sword burst out with an unprecedented aura. This aura was enough to make anyone despair. This piece of heaven and earth also began to crack and shatter. Even the sky was collapsing. The destructive aura, with this place as the center, turned into an invisible giant wave and rolled out in all directions. The surrounding sea area was overturned. Even the bottom of the sea was shaking violently and sinking. It was like a prehistoric earthquake. At the same time, one by one, the sea beasts, under the impact of this air wave, accompanied by desperate wails, kept losing their lives. Billions of miles away from here, there was a huge island, and a group of humans lived on the island. Men, women, old and young, about tens of thousands of them. Originally, everything was very calm and peaceful. Those who hunted, hunted. Those who cultivated, cultivated. However, just as the airwave crazily surged, in just a blink of an eye, along with a loud noise, the island disappeared. The people on the island, before they could react, turned into ashes. There was another island. This island was even bigger. The population was as many as hundreds of thousands. But it was only for a moment, and everything disappeared. Similar things were happening everywhere at this moment. In short, wherever this wave of air went, not a single living being could survive. This scene was definitely a scene of suffering and suffering, a scene of doomsday. Chapter 23-25. Aren't you afraid of being punished by the heavens? Qin Feiyang roared. The slaughter domain that protected him was also cracking and was in danger. Heavenly punishment. Do you have the face to talk about us? Every time you activate the slaughter domain, how many sea beasts have you killed? Let's talk about it later. Whether it's you humans or other beasts, in the eyes of us dragons, you're just ants. It doesn't matter even if you all die. The blonde youth sneered. Qin Feiyang's body stiffened and fell silent. That's right. His hands were also stained with blood. What qualifications did he have to talk about others? Don't panic, because the seal has not been fully unlocked. The 4 ancestral dragons sneered. It's already so terrifying when the seal has not been fully unlocked. Qin Feiyang was shocked. His heart also became worried. How much blood did the slaughter domain have to absorb to be comparable to a fully unlocked divine weapon? Continuing to stack the slaughter domain was obviously not the best way. But now, apart from the slaughter domain, he could no longer find anything that could compete with the divine weapon. The most terrifying thing was, the seal on the hammer had yet to be unlocked. If the seal on this divine weapon was also unlocked, then there would be no way to survive. It's too late to regret now. Go to hell. The blonde youth grabbed the sword and charged towards Qin Feiyang, not giving Qin Feiyang time to continue absorbing the blood. Qin Feiyang's eyes darkened. He raised the blood-colored sword and slashed in anger. Clang! In an instant, the 2 divine weapons met. The situation of the first confrontation did not happen again. In their first clash, the blood-red sword had easily cut through the golden sword. But now, the 2 collided and entered an anxious stalemate. The blonde youth's face was full of sneers. Qin Feiyang's heart was extremely heavy. After the previous enhancement, the power of the blood-colored sword had increased by a large margin compared to before. However, even so, it could no longer pose a threat to the golden sword. One must know, right now, the seal on the golden sword had not been completely unlocked, but it could already compete with the blood-colored sword. Once the seal was completely unlocked, with the current level of the slaughter domain, the situation would most likely be reversed instantly. At that time, it wasn't the blood-colored sword that was crushing the golden sword. It was the golden battle sword that crushed the crimson longsword as easily as crushing dry weeds. Faster! Qin Feiyang roared in his heart. There was still a lot of blood, but absorbing blood, there was a process. The seal was different. The seal on the golden sword was not a seal placed by an outsider. It was a seal placed by the artifact spirit. As long as the seal, it could instantly. So, the speed of the blood-colored sword was of the golden sword. Clang! Suddenly, the golden Tessestier mort, the blood-colored longsword in Qin Feiyang's hand, was immediately shattered. Come! STS Qin Feiyang saw that the situation was bad and immediately activated the battle character formula. The battle armor formed by the battle symbol art did not even last half a blink of an eye before it shattered into pieces. Ah, Qin Feiyang's body under the golden sword was instantly dripping with blood, and his bones were exposed. An aura of death also shrouded him. I should listen to the ancestor. When I'm strong, I'll come to divine land again, Qin Feiyang muttered. His consciousness quickly fell into darkness. All along, he had underestimated the power of the dragons and the power of the heaven-defying artifact. A heaven-defying divine artifact with its seal unlocked was not something he could shake. Unfortunately, it was too late to realize this now. Just as Qin Feiyang was about to lose all hope and his consciousness was about to dissipate, a black divine light suddenly emerged from his glabella. As soon as this divine light appeared, it immediately covered Qin Feiyang's body, blocking the golden sword. Immediately after, a black vortex emerged from Qin Feiyang's glabella. As soon as this black vortex appeared, the golden sword's estes was completely absorbed. Even the destructive airwaves emitted by the golden sword were all absorbed by the black vortex. This, the golden-haired young man and the other three stared at Qin Feiyang's glabella. What was that? It could actually absorb the divine artifact's edge. And it was a heaven-defying artifact that was unsealed. Artifact spirit, unseal it all. The golden-haired young man came back to his senses and hurriedly shouted. Clang! The golden sword vibrated, and an even more terrifying aura erupted like a volcano. Crack! Boom! Within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles, whether it was the void or the sea, instantly turned into chaos. Except for the 4 ancestral dragons and Qin Feiyang, there was no living creature. Not to mention living creatures. Not even a stone, not even a speck of dust. It had completely turned into a chaotic zone, as if heaven and earth had just been created. But there were countless storms. An extremely terrifying storm filled the entire chaotic zone. Even an elite of the 9 heavens realm would be torn to pieces in an instant. Even an elite of the undead realm, just like the 4 ancestral dragons, if it weren't for the 2 heaven-defying artifacts protecting them, they would definitely have died at this moment. The most important thing was, this disaster not only affected the entire sea, but even the continents outside the sea were also devastated. The mountains, villages, and cities began to collapse and shatter into pieces. The earth was also cracking. Countless creatures died tragically, and blood stained the mountains and rivers. Even the enchantment of the divine land also emerged. This enchantment covered the entire divine land, so when the enchantment appeared, it immediately alarmed everyone in the divine land. Whether it was humans or beasts, they all looked at the enchantment at this moment, their eyes full of shock. What was going on? Who was fighting? And the fluctuations were so terrifying, especially the enchantment above the sea. Because the battlefield was in the sea, the enchantment above the sea bore the brunt of the impact. Under the impact of the golden sword's aura, it twisted crazily, the boundary of the sky dragon sea. The 2 burly men guarding the entrance were now standing above the sky dragon sea, looking at the twisted enchantment in horror. Was the seal of the heaven-defying artifact unsealed? It was too terrifying. Although separated by the enchantment, they couldn't help but feel fear in their hearts. Look at Qin Feiyang again. The dark divine light had been protecting him. The black vortex between his eyebrows was also getting bigger and bigger, constantly absorbing the aura and sharpness of the golden sword. Qin Feiyang's mind gradually became clear. When he noticed this scene, a trace of joy suddenly crept up in his heart, because he was very familiar with the divine light that protected him. It was the ancient castle. He quickly took out a life-divine pill and threw it into his mouth. Pain, for him, was no longer important as long as he survived. The black vortex did not disappear because of his awakening. What do you want to do? Qin Feiyang secretly asked, but the ancient castle did not respond to him. Qin Feiyang did not ask again, because from the beginning until now, the ancient castle had not answered any of his questions. Boom! Suddenly, Qin Feiyong's mind exploded with a dull bang. This was too sudden. Qin Feiyong was completely unprepared, and his consciousness was almost shattered by this loud bang. Immediately after, a vast aura emerged from his eyebrows. Clang! The next moment, a palm-sized ancient castle swept out from between his eyebrows and suspended in front of Qin Feiyong. This is... Qin Feiyong shook his head, and when his consciousness became clear when he saw the ancient castle in front of him, his face suddenly crept up with ecstasy. The ancient castle left between his eyebrows. Didn't it mean that the seal of the golden small beast had been broken? Thinking of this, he finally understood. The ancient castle was previously using the power of the golden sword, coupled with its own power, to break the seal imposed by the small beast. Boom! The ancient castle said nothing. At that moment, a terrifying aura that was not inferior to the golden sword suddenly rushed out. The enchantment above the sea area seemed to have reached its limit, and cracks began to appear on it. What? Seeing this, the two burly men guarding the entrance immediately fled without looking back. Once this enchantment was broken, the destructive power of the heaven-defying artifact would rush out like a flood. Both of them would die. This was the horror of the unsealing of the heaven-defying artifact. However, the ancient castle did not directly confront the golden sword, but rolled up Qin Feiyong and flew toward the sky. The blond youth's eyes were cold, looking at the black-robed elder and the burly man, and said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid this will be a tough battle. You should immediately inform the other ancestral dragons." The two nodded. Whoosh! The blond youth and the silver-haired youth looked at each other, and immediately took the heaven-defying artifact and flew toward the ancient castle and Qin Feiyong. At the top of the sky, the ancient castle did not stop and directly crashed into the enchantment. With a loud bang, a big hole suddenly appeared in the shattered enchantment. And this was also like a fuse. The entire enchantment began to disintegrate. But for this scene, Qin Feiyong and the ancient castle did not pay attention to it, and flew straight into the Star River. The blond youth and the silver-haired youth looked at the enchantment, frowned, and ignored it, and chased into the Star River. Clang! Rumble! In the depths of the Star River, 3 light shadows crazily collided, exuding a destructive power. It was the axe, sunset, divine bow, and iron fan. The 3 heaven-defying artifacts had been unsealed, and even the Star River was collapsing. Even Longzuin did not dare to approach the battlefield. She stood in the distance, looking at the axe from afar. A cold light flashed in her eyes. When the ancient castle took Qin Feiyong into the Star River, Longzuin's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, and when she turned her head, the frost on her face became thicker. Whoosh! Without a word, the ancient castle directly attacked the sunset divine bow and iron fan. But before approaching the battlefield, Qin Feiyong only felt his body become light, and the next moment he appeared in the hall of the ancient castle. Obviously, the ancient castle took the initiative to send him in, because if Qin Feiyong were to stay outside, it would be a hindrance instead. With a clang, the ancient castle collided with the sunset divine bow, and immediately sparks flew everywhere. Although I don't know your origin, it is my honor to be able to fight side by side with you. The axe artifact spirit laughed loudly, and instantly became thousands of feet long, like a giant axe splitting the sky, and chopped at iron fan. The ancient castle still did not make a sound, like a silent old man. Damn it! Longzuin's face sank. Lord, we are here. And I have already asked Old Black and the others to inform the other ancestral dragons. I believe that soon everyone will come to support. The blond youth and the silver-haired youth rushed in. The 2 heaven-defying artifacts directly flew into the depths of the Star River and attacked the ancient castle and the axe. The blond youth and the silver-haired youth rushed to Longzuin's side, because after the heaven-defying artifacts were unsealed, they could not interfere in the battle. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.